Good Saturday. We made it to Saturday. Hope everyone is doing great. I have a new stream setup that I'm working through with the selling of my property, of our rental property. I have Stream Deck XL. Get my beacon from previously. I'm using that. I haven't had a big problem with that. New earphones. I've got a new microphone, it's a shotgun microphone, so I don't have to have it pointing in front of my face, which has been annoying for trying to get in and working with the keyboard. So this is good. Hopefully that works well. And what else? I've got my standing desk. It's not put together yet. It's put together actually, but I have to rip it apart because one of the legs is not facing the right way. And also some of the screws wouldn't go in all the way into the wood. So I have to pre-drill some holes there and then fix that one leg. So that's, yeah, I'm super busy. Work is amazing. I also got the Synology backup too. It's a 4-drive backup. And I've got that basically configured for us to start using it, but I haven't had a chance to get it configured and get it out there for everyone. No sound? Can you hear me now? How about now? Be able to? Hello? Nothing now? Can you hear me now? How about now? Is it loud enough? Now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nothing? That's not good. Better? Okay. Yeah, I've got it. I have a new mic and a new mic setup. Okay, that's at maximum. How's that? I have a shotgun mic. It's the first time using it, so knowing that this is, could it be louder still? Or is this acceptable to hear me at? At some point, I'll get it closer to my face so the sound quality will be better, but it's a bit farther away than I would prefer at this point. Once I get the new desk put together, then I'll hopefully be able to get the microphone a bit closer to me. Okay. All right. I'm glad that's better. How's the music? Because I don't know. I have it low in my ear. And how's it for you guys? Is it okay for you guys? Let me switch over. This is pretty loud. We'll see. Okay. How about you guys? How are you doing, Quiet Mercenary? How's your week been? Got lots of toys to play with. And our studio computer is no longer put more compression. Okay. Let's see if we can do compression. Yep, that's fine. Let's go here. No. I will have to go to properties. No, filters. Compression. Okay, how about that? Is this better? I have some compression on her. Yeah, it does sound kind of loud a little bit. Filters. Okay. Is this better? I have some compression on there. I've turned threshold up and ratio up too. ah, is it better? Can you hear me now? Do I need to play with compression more? I don't know much about it, but I've turned the threshold up a bit more. You can hear me fine? Oh, RB Economy, how you doing? Welcome. How's your week going? How's the music too? Got a whole new setup and I don't know what's going on yet. Ah, yeah, we do talk about RBE stuff here. That's since that's the basics of my policy. Doing well? Good. Good to hear. Good to hear. Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of new toys, and our studio computer is deciding to not put sound through Zoom. So I got to fix that today. Got my daughter's computer, Synology backup, microphone, um, standing desk, lots of stuff that I need to mess with today, and I won't have time to get to all of it. So, yeah, you don't hear music? Okay, let's see. VOD audience. Okay, you should. Let's turn that up. How about now? Oh, it's changing tracks. If I do this, do that. Okay, how about now? Oh, yeah, you do. All right, how's that? The neat thing about this beacon, I can hear what the audience hears. Does that sound okay? Too low? Fortnite skill game, how you doing? Still no music? How about now? I just got these. The Arctis Nova Pro wireless. No music yet. Go into audience. Yeah, they're expensive. Nice. Yeah, I'm just lucky to get them. We sold our rental property and I was able to buy some toys for my stream, so that's been nice. I just put them on yesterday and I got them the day before, so I'm still kind of getting used to them. It's gonna be nice. It's gonna be nice. Lots of good stuff here. Um, so no music yet? I just got the XM4. Oh, cool. Nice. Nice. Any music yet? Anybody? I also got my second 30. Do you? I haven't played. I can't play that. My hands won't be able to handle it. I do turn-based stuff. What do I have? Warhammer 40K, Chaos Gates, Humankind, Baldur's Gate 3. It's in beta. Knights Arthur, King Arthur, Knight's Tale, Solasta. I have War Tales, which is just okay. Mordheim, which is pretty old, and BattleTech, which is also fairly old too. Nothing too exciting. Ah, no music yet. What the flying hell in a box? Um, I've maxed it up over there in this one. Where's music? Music's here. I should go to audience. Oh well, I hear it on my side, and it's really fucking loud for the audience mix. So I don't know why you guys don't hear it. We'll have to play with that later. Um, all right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get going here? Anyone have any last minute comments before we get started? For anyone who's new, this is my policy site. I have my own political policies and my blog, about politics for over a decade. You find out a lot there about resource-based economies, which is kind of here under global change, and a bunch of my posts here that you can try out. And the third stage of my policies is a shift to a resource-based economy. So a lot of stuff there. There's like 205 pages here worth of content in case you're bored, want to go to sleep. Yeah. It's just this climate change bullshit just if we had a resource-based economy, we wouldn't be dealing with climate change. Yeah, please do. There's a lot of work there. Many hours of work. I need to get back to blogging more, but I don't have time. I don't have time to get my new toys set up. So hopefully someday I'll get back to writing some stuff. I have easily 5 years worth of posts sitting there that are just waiting to be finished. They're just in various forms of. They are. We are very much LGBTQIAP friendly here. Very pro. All right. Let's see what these guys have to say. Some stupid shit, I'm pretty sure. Oh, I have to get the. Hold on. I also have to get what I have to get. Yes, this. Captions. Captions working. Work, damn you. Are you working? Work. Work, captions work. Work, captions work. Oh, I have to change my source. That's why. Caption source will be here. All right. All right, captions work. Work. You massively support. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and it's really ridiculous not to. I mean, yikes. Come on, captions. Lowering this to 2. Should be NVIDIA broadcast. Yeah, I'm able to use NVIDIA broadcast too, which I'm very happy with. It's gotta be NVIDIA broadcast. All right, well, I guess we'll see what happens here. All right, we'll keep going. All right, U.S. Library defunded after refusing to censor LGBTQ authors. We will not ban the books. Residents of Jamestown, Michigan voted this week to shut down town's library rather than tolerate certain LGBTQ books. Yeah, and this is bullshit here. This is on August 5th, so this was yesterday. A small town library is at risk of shutting down after residents of Jamestown, Michigan voted to defund it rather than tolerate certain LGBTQ plus themed books. Residents voted on Tuesday to block a renewal of funds tied to property taxes. Bridge, Michigan reported. The vote leaves the library with funds through the first quarter of next year. Once a reserve fund is used up, it would be forced to close. Larry Walton, the library board's president, told Bridge, Michigan, harming not just the readers but the community at large. Beyond books, residents visit the library for its Wi-Fi, he said, and it houses the very room where the vote took place. Yeah, our library is undergoing a massive expansion, almost doubling in size. We passed a referendum, I think, last year. And I mean, it's going to be over doubling in size, which is awesome. And it's the new expansion is going to be primarily for teens. Others, yeah, teens, high schoolers, and that sort of stuff to study and all that stuff. Our libraries are places to read, places to gather, places to socialize, places to study, places to learn. I mean, they're the heart of every community. Deborah McCullough, executive director of the Michigan Library Association, told The Guardian. So how can you lose that? We are champions of access, she added, including materials that might appeal to some in the community and not others. We want to make sure the libraries protect the right to read. Yeah, and this is one of those things, when you look at like steps to a resource-based economy, the library is a great example of it. If you want something, you can go to the library and check it out, or get access to Wi-Fi or rooms and that sort of a thing. Libraries are amazing. But if we didn't have public libraries, there's that meme that's going around that if someone was to recommend public libraries, they would brand it as socialist and vote it down all the time in this horrible political climate we find ourselves in. The controversy in Jamestown began with a complaint about a memoir by a non-binary writer, but it soon spiraled into a campaign against Patmos Library itself, after a parent complained about Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. A graphic novel about the author's experience coming out as non-binary. Dozens showed up at library board meetings demanding the institution drop the book. The book, which includes depictions of sex, was in the adult section of the library. Complaints began to target other books with LGBTQ plus themes. One library director resigned, telling Bridge she had been harassed and accused of indoctrinating kids. Her successor, Matt Lawrence, also left the job. Though the library put Kobabe's book behind the counter rather than on the shelves, the volumes remained available. We, the board, will not ban books, as it should be, Walton told Associated Press on Thursday. A few months later, in March, an anonymous letter went to homes in the area. It criticized the pornographic memoir and the addition of transgender and gay books to the library, according to Lawrence. That fired a lot of people up and got them to start coming to our board meetings to complain, he said. The concern from the public was that it's going to confuse children. Oh my fucking God. Children are already confused because they're LGBTQ and people are railing against it. Right-wingers are destroying these people. There are families that are religious, conservative, and basically causing their children to kill themselves. They're already confused. They feel a certain way, and society, their friends, their family are against it. That is the problem, not books. These books, these LGBTQ books in libraries, are a way for people who are, okay, yeah, awesome, man. Have a great weekend. Thanks for popping by. It's great to see you. Got my blog and my policies to look at when you get super bored and need to go to sleep. Have a great weekend, man. Peace. Yeah, so these books in the libraries are ways for LGBTQ kids to try and find themselves and figure out who they are and what they are. Yeah. So they're really important. It's nice that now that we have more of these books in these libraries so children can figure out what they are or who they are. It's super important to people figuring out their identity. The library's refusal to submit to the demands led to a campaign urging residents to vote against renewed funding for the library. A group calling itself Jamestown Conservatives, of course, handed out flyers condemning genderqueer for showing extremely graphic sexual illustrations of two people of the same gender, criticizing a library director who promoted the LGBTQ ideology, and calling for making the library a safe and neutral place for our kids. On Facebook, the group says it exists to keep our children safe and to protect their purity, as well as to keep the nuclear family intact as God designed. Oh my God, if these right-wing nutjobs only understood actual human history. The nuclear family didn't exist. It's a modern invention of the last 100 or so years. For the majority of our existence, over almost if you include our genetic and evolutionary history, it's over hundreds of thousands, over 400,000 to a million years. Evolutionarily, we've been in large tribal groups that shared everything. We're talking in the Paleolithic, hunter-gatherer society, and then even once we get into the Neolithic, the rise of agrarianism, large extended families live together. Nuclear family is a byproduct of capitalism. And God didn't do that. God didn't create that. God created Adam and Eve, who, populated the earth through incest. That's what God created. Residents ultimately voted 62% to 37% against a measure that would have raised property taxes by roughly $24 in order to fund the library, even as they approved similar measures to fund the fire department and road work. The library was one of just a few in the state to suffer such a loss, McCullough said. most passing with flying colors, sometimes up to 80%. The vote came as a, quote, shock to Lawrence, who left his job in part because of town officials' criticism of the Patmos Library and libraries across the U.S. I knew that there were people that were upset about material in the library, but I figured that enough people would realize that what they're trying to do with the removal of these books is antithetical to our Constitution, free speech, particularly the First Amendment, and religious freedom, too. The vote comes as libraries across the U.S. face a surge in demands to ban books. The American Library Association identified 729 challenges to library, school, and university materials and services last year, which led to about 1,600 challenges or removals of individual books. That was up from 273 books the year before and represents the highest number of attempted book bans since we began compiling these lists 20 years ago. The ALA president, Patricia Wong, said in a press release. We're seeing what appears to be a campaign to remove books, particularly books dealing with LGBTQIA themes and books dealing with racism. Yes, of course, the critical race theory bullshit. Ugh. Deborah Caldwell-Stone, head of the ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom, told The Guardian last year. Celebrated books by Toni Morrison, Alison Bechdel, and Ibram X. Kendi are among those facing bans. Yeah, I think okay. I'm not quite sure what instigated the culture wars we're seeing, but libraries are certainly at the front end, Mikula said. Indeed, as states across the U.S. move to deny LGBTQ rights, the ALA's #1 most challenged book last year was Gender Queer. When you remove those books from the shelf or you challenge them publicly in a community, what you're saying to any young person who identified with that narrative is, we don't want your story here, Kababi told the New York Times in May. Yeah, it is. It really is. And this is a huge issue with capitalism. Capitalism creates a division between us and them, sort of a thing. And it's part of the humanity's terminal disease, the disease of separation I talk about. At some point I'll have a post that comes out and talks about this, but because capitalism requires a separation, racism or any of these sorts of isms are a result of that terminal disease that we have, that disease of separation. And the only way we can really get beyond it is to shift to a socioeconomic system that is based on interdependence, that's based on collectiveness, not separation. And separation is that disease that causes this problem. And when I talk about things, I talk about a resource-based economy. If you want to read more about that, my blog over here has a lot on it. I'll go ahead and share it. I know I share it like I hoard out all the time, but this is the base post if you want to read about a resource-based economy. It goes into the issues with capitalism and talks about why a resource-based economy is part of that solution. Yeah, it's interesting. Before I got into politics, I really didn't know anyone who was LGBTQIAP or whatever. But since I got into politics, I have some, I know a bunch of people who have been, trans and LGBT and all that sort of stuff. So it's been interesting. Although the trans aspect is not something I've investigated so much. So it's been a little more of a struggle, but it's, I support it, but I need to learn more. But you can say that just pretty much about everything. Each library chooses its own collection, Mikula noted, and an intensive process that involves staying abreast of what's new, listening to what's been requested, and weeding out selections that are rarely on loan. Our librarians are qualified. They have advanced degrees, she said. We are trusted and credible, and that they're making sure that the full community is represented within the library, and that means having LGBTQ books. Yeah, and another part of this is, was Dan Savage. He said something like this, oh God, a long time ago. Something about, the right is always very well organized, orchestrated, and they're very good at getting people together to do mass movements. But those who are on the left aren't. I mean, why wasn't there a left out there meeting, putting out flyers to help fight this? I mean, this happening is the direct result of people not standing up in solidarity with the people in their community. This is a problem. That's one of the things that we need to be teaching in our schools. That's in my policies there for education. we need to teach our children solidarity. And how will our children have to suffer with bullying if the kids in their class stand up against the bullies? They stand up in solidarity against the oppressed. That's what we need to be teaching our children. Solidarity, nonviolent communication. What's the other one? Nonviolent communication. There's another one there in my policies. But that's the sort of things that we need to be teaching our children so that we can get rid of fascists, get rid of bullies, and our children can be the heroes that that they really need to be for each other. If community members oppose the inclusion of certain books, there are formal means of requesting their removal, including a review committee and ascertainment that the person making the appeal has actually read the book in question. Good point. If they have not read the book, then they need to shut the fuck up about it, I suppose. But recently she said people have been going to board meetings, whether it's a library board meeting or a school board meeting, and saying, here's a list of 300 books, we want them all to be removed from your library. And that's not the proper channel, but they're loud and their voices carry. Yeah, and the squeaky wheels get the oil, right? Yeah, this is sad. This is really sad. And a lot of this is because the United States has one of the largest levels of inequality in the developed world because of high levels of inequality, low levels of social trust, high levels of conservatism and tribalism, that sort of a thing. If the United States wants to work towards fixing this, then we're talking universal healthcare, universal education, UBI, housing is a human right, and all that sorts of things. My policies cover all that sort of stuff. The only way we can reduce this sort of ridiculous stupidness is by lowering inequality. Pretty much every single problem that humanity has, the answer is in lowering inequality. Full stop. All right, any questions, comments, and suggestions before we move on? I mentioned this concept before, the 3.5% rule. It just happens to be that I found an article on this. It just popped up in my stream. So do I have the time on this? When was this posted? Oh, this is May 2019. So this is dated, but it's still interesting. All right, any questions before we move on? Anything? Okay, this is from BBC Future from 2019. The 3.5% rule, how a small minority can change the world. Nonviolent protests are twice as likely to succeed as armed conflicts, and those engaging a threshold of 3.5% of the population have never failed to bring about change. So it's not a lot. If a mass movement wants to get something done, this is what they need. And one of the issues I talk about, like, let's look at the People's Party and the Forward Party with Andrew Yang. Now, on my stream, we've gone over his policies. And to be fair to him, a lot of his policies are very similar to mine. But we also have some very specific things I don't agree on with him. But when thinking about both of those as parties, the issue is we don't actually need a new party. I mean, we only have a one-party system, but what we really need is an overarching umbrella organization to bring together leftists and to unify them to get stuff done. Like, as an example here, if you want to start working on a mass movement for climate change, you get all the environmental groups, Green Party, every single group that cares about the climate under one umbrella on a website, and then they can plan en masse throughout the whole country or the world to do a protest on the same day throughout the entire country or world. We don't need another party. It'd be nice to have an actual left party in the United States, which we don't have, but we just need to bring all of our groups together and have them work together instead of working against each other. They're wasting time creating flyers, recreating the wheel there, and data and information and all that sort of stuff. We need an organization that brings leftists together and then have them work together. That's what we really need. And that's how you can get this. All right. In 1986, millions of Filipinos took to the streets of Manila in peaceful protest and prayer in the People Power movement. The Marcos regime folded on the fourth day. Wow. 2003, the people of Georgia ousted Eduard Shevardnadze through the bloodless Rose Revolution, in which protesters stormed the parliament building holding flowers in their hands. While in 2019, the presidents of Sudan and Algeria both announced they would step aside after decades in office thanks to peaceful campaign of resistance. Wow. In each case, civil resistance by ordinary members of the public trumped the political elite to achieve radical change. There are, of course, many ethical reasons to use nonviolent strategies, but compelling research by Erica Chenoweth, a political scientist at Harvard University, confirms that civil disobedience is not only the moral choice, it is also the most powerful way of shaping world politics by a long way. Looking at hundreds of campaigns over the last century, Chenoweth found that nonviolent campaigns are twice as likely to achieve their goals as violent campaigns. And although the exact dynamics will depend on many factors, she has shown it takes around 3.5% of the population to actively participating in the protests to ensure serious political change. Chenoweth's influence can be seen in the recent Extinction Rebellion protests, whose founders say they have been directly inspired by her foundings. So just how did she come to these conclusions? So yeah, here's one of those things, right? I've heard in the last few weeks of Extinction Rebellion doing some protests, but there weren't that many people there. And it's, again, for climate, XR should be a part of a larger climate organization or climate umbrella so that they can get more people doing it. They can't just be a few people. You've got all these leftist organizations just recreating the wheel and wasting their resources. And here's a picture of Extinction Rebellion. Needless to say, Chenoweth's research builds on the philosophies of many influential figures throughout history. The African-American abolitionist Sojourner Truth, the suffrage campaigner Susan B. Anthony, the Indian independence activist Mahatma Gandhi, and the U.S. civil rights campaigner Martin Luther King have all convincingly argued for the power of peaceful protest. Yet Chenoweth admits that when she first began her research in the mid-2000s, she was initially rather cynical of the idea that nonviolent actions could be more powerful than armed conflict in most situations. As a PhD student at the University of Colorado, she had spent years studying the factors contributing to the rise of terrorism when she was asked to attend an academic workshop organized by the International Center of Nonviolent Conflict, a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. The workshop presented many compelling examples of peaceful protests bringing about lasting political change, including, for instance, the People Power protests in the Philippines. But Chenoweth was surprised to find out that no one had comprehensively compared the success rates of nonviolent versus violent protests. Perhaps the case studies were simply chosen through some kind of confirmation bias. I was really motivated by some skepticism that nonviolent resistance could be an effective method for achieving major transformations in the society, she says. Working with Maria Stephan, a researcher at the ICNC, Chenoweth performed an extensive review of the literature on civil resistance and social movements from 1900 to 2006, a data set then corroborated with other experts. Okay, let's try that again. Social movements from 1900 to 2006, a data set then corroborated with other experts in the field. Okay, that's just kind of strange. Strangely structured sentence. They primarily considered attempts to bring about regime change. A movement was considered a success if it fully achieved its goals, both within a year of its peak engagement and as a direct result of its activities. A regime change resulting from foreign military intervention would not be considered a success, for instance. A campaign was considered violent. Meanwhile, if it involved bombings, kidnappings, the destruction of infrastructure, or any other physical harm to people or property. You know, I'm fairly sure we've read this article before. It's been quite a while, but it's still interesting. We were trying to apply a pretty hard test to nonviolent resistance as a strategy, Chenoweth says. The criteria were so strict that India's independence movement was not considered as evidence in favor of nonviolent protests in the Chenoweth and Stephens analysis, since Britain's dwindling military resources were considered to have been a deciding factor, even if the protests themselves were also a huge influence. By the end of this process, they had collected data from 323 violent and nonviolent campaigns. And their results, which were published in their book, Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict, were striking. I'll go ahead and share this. For you. I should read this sometime. Strength in numbers. Overall, nonviolent campaigns were twice as likely to succeed as violent campaigns. They led to political change 53% of the time, compared to 26% for the violent protests. This is partly the result of strength in numbers. Chenoweth argues that nonviolent campaigns are more likely to succeed because they can recruit many more participants from a much broader demographic, which can cause severe disruption that paralyzes normal urban life and the functioning of society. Yeah, it'll be easier. It's easier to get people to do something nonviolent than it is to get people to do something that is violent. Okay, the captions are starting to show up. Awesome. In fact, of the 25 largest campaigns that they studied, 20 were nonviolent and 14 of these were outright successes. Overall, the nonviolent campaigns attracted around 4 times as many participants, 200,000, as the average violent campaign, 50,000. The People Power campaign against the Marcos regime in the Philippines, for instance, attracted 2 million participants at its height, while the Brazilian uprising in 1984 and 85 attracted 1 million. And the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia in 1989 attracted 500,000 participants. Having attracted millions of supporters, the People Power demonstrations removed the Marcos regime in the Philippines. This is from Getty Images. Okay. Numbers really matter for building power in ways that can really pose a serious challenge or threat to entrenched authorities or occupations, Chenoweth says, and nonviolent protests seem to be the best way to get that widespread support. Once around 3.5% of the whole population has begun to participate actively, success appears to be inevitable. Besides the People Power movement, the Singing Revolution in Estonia and the Rose Revolution in Georgia all reached the 3.5% threshold. There weren't any campaigns that had failed after they had achieved 3.5% participation during a peak event, says Chenoweth, a phenomenon she has called the 3.5% rule. Besides the People Power movement, that included the Singing Revolution in Estonia and the late 1980s, and in the late 1980s, and the Rose Revolution in Georgia in early 2003. Chenoweth admits that she was initially surprised by her results, but she now cites many reasons that nonviolent protests can garner such high levels of support. Perhaps most obviously, violent protests necessarily exclude people who abhor and fear bloodshed, whereas peaceful protests maintain the moral high ground. Yeah, and it's not just that. It's just that, not everyone wants to potentially sacrifice their life for it or be in danger of bodily harm. Chenoweth points out that nonviolent protests also have fewer physical barriers to participation. You do not need to be fit and healthy to engage in a strike, whereas violent campaigns tend to lean on the support of physically fit young men, and also having access to weapons, possibly too, right? And while many forms of nonviolent protests also carry serious risks, just think of China's response in Tiananmen Square in 1989, Chenoweth agrees that nonviolent campaigns are generally easier to discuss openly, which means that news of their occurrence can reach a wider audience. Okay, yep. Riot. Riot, no. Riot implies destroying stuff, destroying property. I don't think we should do that. But this nonviolent stuff, I think this is something we should definitely do. Again, for climate change specifically, and also to end the United States as the largest terrorist organization in the world, that we definitely should do. Those are two things that have to end. If we are going to work towards the climate and saving humanity from extinction, we definitely need protests, nonviolent demonstrations to end the U.S.'s global terrorism projects and shift that money into climate change stuff. We definitely need protests. People need to be in the streets. And one of the reasons people aren't in the streets are because, inequality is a large part of it. A lot of us are so in debt and struggling that the people just can't do it so much. It's very difficult to do here because we have high levels of inequality. In societies where they're more equal, there's less of a need to do protests because life is better and more equal. But in more equal societies, it's easier for them to do protests because they don't have the threat of losing their job, being an issue, losing their housing, and all that sort of stuff. But eventually, even in heavily unequal societies, things are going to get bad enough where people are going to stand up and just say, no, this has got to stop. That needs to happen here in this country. It does. We're so beyond fucked in this country. I mean, it's horrific. Horrific how bad we are as a country. At least our government. At least as our government. I'm not talking about the people. Although, in some cases, as you see with our first article, the right-wingers doing their thing. But, as people of this country, people all across the world are good, inherently, generally. It's the inequality that destroys them. If you want to read more about that, so as a part of my policies, I have the books you need to read. Let me share this with you. And perhaps the most important book in there, I wish everyone could read, would be this one here, The New Human Rights Movement by Peter Joseph. This is one of the best books ever. Please read it. Here on my page here, there's a video here of his talk following his release, following the release of the book in 2017. And that is a link to the book itself. And this is the movie he came out last year, the year before. Yeah, 2 years ago. It's really good too. So if you want something to read, The New Human Rights Movement. Also, there's these other books too, which are really good. These two are about inequality. This is about economics. This is a great book. And both of these are about the harms of inequality and shifting to a resource-based economy. So if you read these in order, these two kind of prepare you for this, and this will also prepare you for, kind of this sort of a thing, but also my policies as well. So read this book. Yeah, so we definitely need protests. Definitely. And that's, again, with Andrew Yang, that's something he could be the very center point for. And the issue with Yang is he's a technocrat, a capitalist technocrat. So he's still all about capitalism. But if he really wanted change, and I'd love to have him on this channel, actually. I'm going to ask him at some point so we can talk about that. But if he really wanted change, he would get rid of the Forward Party, at least as a party. It's really a PAC. And change it to be this umbrella organization to bring leftists together. If he really wanted change, that's what he would do, because we could hit that 3.5% a number of population in this country fairly easily if he did that. Okay. Violent movements, on the other hand, require a supply of weapons and tend to rely on more secretive underground operations that might struggle to reach the general population. By engaging broad support across the population, nonviolent campaigns are also more likely to win support among the police and military, the very groups that government should be leaning on to bring about order. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Like we had with Ukraine, some Russian soldiers stood down because they didn't want to kill other white people, other people that they deemed as Russians, right? So, yeah, it definitely can. During a peaceful street protest of millions of people, the members of the security forces may also be more likely to fear that their family members or friends are in the crowd. Okay, yep. Meaning that they fail to crack down on the movement. Or when they're looking at the sheer numbers of people involved, they may just come to the conclusion that the ship has sailed and they don't want to go down with the ship, Chenoweth says. Okay, yep. Sort of a morale issue. In terms of the specific strategies that are used, general strikes are probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, single method of nonviolent resistance, Chenoweth says. But they do come at a personal cost, whereas other forms of protest can be completely anonymous. she points to the consumer boycotts in apartheid era South Africa, in which many black citizens refused to buy products from companies with white owners. The result was an economic crisis among the country's white elite that contributed to the end of segregation in the early 1900s. Yeah, I'm all about the BDS movement, especially for um, Israel. We should be BDSing any country that violates human rights standards. Now, the United States, of course, is a massive violator of human rights standards, so there's an issue there that we need to fix. But at least we can, companies and hedge funds and mutual funds and stuff can start working towards divesting of anything dealing with Israel. That's one way to help deal with it. Yeah, BDS is another form of nonviolent economic protest. There are more options for engaging in nonviolent resistance that don't place people in as much physical danger, particularly as the numbers grow, compared to armed activity, Chenoweth says. And the techniques of nonviolent resistance are often more visible so that it's easier for people to find out how to participate directly and how to coordinate their activities for maximum disruption. All right, just a second. Magic number. There are very general patterns, of course, and despite being twice as successful as the violent conflicts, peaceful resistance still failed 47% of the time, as Chenoweth and Stephan pointed out in their book. That's sometimes because they never really gained enough support or momentum to erode the power base of the adversary and maintain resilience in the face of repression. But some relatively large nonviolent protests also failed, such as the protests against the Communist Party in East Germany in the 1950s, which attracted 400,000 members, around 2% of the population at their peak, but still failed to bring about change. In Chenoweth's dataset, it was only once the nonviolent protests had achieved that 3.5% threshold of active engagement that success seemed to be guaranteed. And raising even that level of support is no mean feat. In the UK, it would amount to 2.3 million people actively engaging in a movement roughly twice the size of Birmingham, the UK's second largest city. In the US, it would involve 11 million citizens, more than the total population of New York City. The fact remains, however, that nonviolent campaigns are the only reliable way of maintaining that kind of engagement. Chenoweth and Stephan's initial study was first published in 2011, and their findings have attracted a lot of attention since. It's hard to overstate how influential they have been to this body of research, says Matthew Chandler, who researches civil resistance at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. Isabel Bramson, who studies international conflict at the University of Copenhagen, agrees that Chenoweth and Stephan's results are compelling. It's now an established truth within the field that the nonviolent approaches are much more likely to succeed than violent ones, she says. Regarding the 3.5% rule, she points out that while 3.5% is a small minority, such a level of active participation probably means that many more people tacitly agree with the cause. These researchers are now looking to further untangle the factors that may lead to a movement's success or failure. Bramson and Chandler, for instance, both emphasize the importance of unity among demonstrators. Okay. As an example, Bramson points to the failed uprising in Bahrain in 2011. The campaign initially engaged many protesters, but quickly split into competing factions. The resulting loss of cohesion, Bramson thinks, ultimately prevented the movement from gaining enough momentum to bring about change. Chenoweth's interest has recently focused on protests closer to home, like the Black Lives Matter movement and the Women's March in 2017. She's also interested in Extinction Rebellion, recently popularized by the involvement of Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. They are up against a lot of inertia, she says, but I think that they have an incredibly thoughtful and strategic core. They seem to have all the right instincts about how to develop and teach through a nonviolent resistance campaign. Ultimately, she would like our history books to pay greater attention to nonviolent campaigns rather than concentrating so heavily on warfare. So many of the histories that we tell one another focus on violence, and even if it's it is a total disaster, we still find a way to find victories within, she says. Yet we tend to ignore the success of peaceful protest, she says. Yeah, and that's kind of a United States thing because we basically worship violence. And violence is kind of the most important thing. Look at our movies. Look at right-wingers and their guns, their homosexuality, and that sort of a thing. It's inequality kind of breeds that. So yeah, we concentrate on violence because that's what's primarily on our mind. It's part of that disease of inequality. Ordinary people all the time are engaging in pretty heroic activities that are actually changing the way the world, and those deserve some notice and celebration too. All right. There you go. There's that article. Questions, comments, or suggestions before we move on to the next one? You guys still don't have music. All right. Next article here. This is from the AP, July 26th, so it's a little over almost 2 weeks old. Judge, Uber doesn't have to offer wheelchair accessibility. And this is going to get overturned. California federal judge has rejected a legal push to require Uber to provide wheelchair accessible vehicles, finding that such a mandate would be too onerous on the ride-hailing company. Okay, there is that sort of exception within accessibility that it would be too onerous. So they basically they hire independent contractors to do the driving. So they would have to basically require someone who wanted to join, a certain amount of them to have the wheelchair accessible car. That might be difficult, actually. Okay, maybe it won't. Let's see what they have to say. California federal judge has rejected a legal push to require Uber to provide wheelchair accessible vehicles, finding that such a mandate would be too onerous to the ride-hailing company. U.S. District Chief Judge Richard Seaborg ruled Monday in San Francisco against Scott Crawford of Mississippi and two co-plaintiffs from New Orleans who had argued that Uber's failure to implement accessible ride-sharing violated the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah, and just I'm into accessibility. My profession is a quote digital accessibility expert, and the key thing here with the ADA, and we can look at this if we need to, but onerous. It shouldn't. Requiring your service to be accessible like this shouldn't be a massive undertaking. And I think, kind of as I was talking before, that what the judge is saying is that doing so would be an issue. But Seaborg wrote that the plaintiffs failed to present a reasonable modification of Uber's services and didn't provide adequate evidence that the company had violated the law. Yeah, so a reasonable modification, that's the issue here. How can they modify their service, which is pretty much done through all independent contractors, unless they've won that already? Have they won becoming employees? I don't remember. Because you would pretty much have to have a car specifically just for wheelchair use. Like there's vans that do that too. They got the wheelchair lift and stuff like that going in. The ruling followed a bench trial that lasted nearly 5 years. The two New Orleans residents were the first to sue the company, alleging that the absence of wheelchair vehicles in the city was a violation of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. WLBT-TV said. Crawford then used the same argument in calling for the vehicles in Jackson. Uber made no sincere attempt to provide accessible services, but instead claimed it was too burdensome, he said. This could have been economically resolved years ago. Okay, how? Attorneys for the plaintiffs argued that Uber has a deep-rooted accessibility problem and treats accessibility as an afterthought. Yeah, and this is what you'll pretty much find for almost every single product and project that's out there. Accessibility for most businesses is an afterthought. It's a special interest that they have to cater to, otherwise they'll get sued. It's not it's never part of the foundational principles of most 90 some percent of businesses. And yeah, and that needs to change. And that's a part of our education system, right? That we're not teaching our children solidarity, that we're not teaching them, compassion. That needs to be a base part of who our children, of how we teach our children to be compassionate and in solidarity with the rest of humanity, and justice as well. And if we taught our children that, who became adults, then their businesses would be based in that sort of an idea. But that's something we can also work towards fixing through some business changes. Like I say in my policies, that one of the issues with businesses is that the primary drive for all of them is profit. That's it. They owe money to the shareholders. That's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing. That's the only way. That is the primary goal of all businesses by law. That's it. And if you violate that, you can lose your job. So what we need to do is change what defines a business, how we judge businesses. So like the laws for corporations and LLCs and that sort of thing need to do this. They need to be judged first by how they affect humanity and how they affect the natural world. They need to be judged by their human rights and their compassion and their, whether they're a sustainable or regenerative business. And then as a tertiary consideration, how are the profits? You do that, then all this changes as well. So again, this is a primary issue with capitalism and the focus on profit as the only thing that matters. Okay. Attorneys for Uber said the programs would cost too much and would not be workable in either municipality. According to estimates obtained by Uber and cited in the decision, the cost for providing the service would cost $800,000 per year in New Orleans and $550,000 in Jackson. Why the fuck would it cost that much? All you need is a few cars that are wheelchair accessible, and well, not a few, you need a bunch that are accessible, and then you're good to go. I'd like to see how those numbers turned out. The decision said costs were based on 16 hours of service on weekdays, 10 hours per day on weekends. Even with 3 vehicles equipped to provide the service available at any given time, some requests might go unfulfilled. Okay, right, that is true. So it's not an actual cost to them. It's a loss in income. Well, but still, suck it up, Buttercup. Although that does mean a less income for the person who's driving driving those cars. That is an issue too, though. Now, if the drivers were made employees, like they kind of should be, then this would be less of an issue. Unless they're paid by fare, then that's problematic. Okay, all right. Uber offers services to accommodate wheelchair users in several other cities, including New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Boston. The company uses commercial operator agreements to fulfill the service in each city, WLBTV reported. Court records state that New Orleans considered an ordinance requiring Uber to provide the service, but Uber lobbied against that ordinance. Of course they did. Crawford, a disability rights activist, decried the arrival of the decision on the eve of the anniversary of the ADA's signature into law. President George H.W. Bush signed the act in July 26, 1990. Crawford said state lawmakers during the next year's legislative session should mandate that ride-hailing services provide wheelchair-accessible vehicles. He is considering appealing the court's ruling, but said he hasn't made a final decision. If he has the ability to, it might be interesting to appeal it, but yeah, I'm not sure. I've not followed litigation like that. How onerous that would honestly be, or if they just it's a cop out. I don't know, but this is an issue. So this is the people with accessibility needs, people with disabilities. have to ask for service. And that's a problem. It just means that they don't have equal access to society when they have to fucking go through a fucking lawsuit just to have transportation to go somewhere. So it's on sheer merit, Uber should lose, but you know. All right. Okay, now we're going to read this. This one is actually pretty long. This is a paper on climate change. It's really long. We're gonna do this. So if you want to get a snack or get something really quick, then we'll go ahead and read this. It's Climate Endgame, Exploring Catastrophic Climate Change Scenarios. It is, yes. PNAS is a what is PNAS? PNAS, National Academy of Sciences. What is? Yeah, I know this, but what's the P? Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the U.S. Yep. You'll see Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about them. I don't do reading very many papers like this on it, but this should be hopefully easy enough to understand. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be easy enough to understand. Is it a paper or is it? It's a perspective, so it's not. I don't think it's actually a paper. It's perspective. It must be a type of article. Yeah, it does, but it's super important. We're climate doomer here, totally. And if you want to, we have. If you look down below, I have a Discord. I have a whole bunch of stuff added there as well. This is from August 1st, 5 days ago. Do you follow climate change much? On here, I cover the three C's: coronavirus, climate change, and capitalism. Those are the three main things. Then we also do sustainable energy, future technology, interstellar travel, and that sort of a thing. A lot of what I post on Discord is in my environmental channel. It's a lot of sustainable energy and environmental technology stuff. Super interesting. All right. Climate Endgame, Exploring Catastrophic Climate Change Scenarios. I don't recognize any of these people. This is from MIT, edited by MIT. Okay. All right, we won't do the abstract. Okay, let's do the abstract. Prudent risk management requires consideration of bad to worst case scenarios, yet for climate change, such potential futures are poorly understood. Could anthropogenic climate change result in worldwide societal collapse or even eventual human extinction? Yes. At present, this is a dangerously underexplored topic, yet there are ample reasons to suspect that climate change could result in global catastrophe. Analyzing the mechanisms for these extreme consequences could help galvanize action, improve resilience, and inform policy, including emergency responses. We outline current knowledge about the likelihood of extreme climate change, discussing why understanding bad to worst cases is vital, articulate reasons for concern about catastrophic outcomes, define key terms, and put forward a research agenda. The proposed agenda covers four main questions. What is the potential for climate change to drive mass extinction events? What is the potential for what are the mechanisms that could result in human mass mortality and morbidity? What are human societies' vulnerabilities to climate-triggered risk cascades, such as from conflict, political instability, and systemic financial crisis? 4. How can these multiple strands of evidence tied together with other global dangers be usefully synthesized into an integrated catastrophe assessment? It is time for the scientific community to grapple with the challenge of better understanding catastrophic climate change. All right, so that's what they're going to talk about. Here we go. How bad could climate change get? As early as 1988, the landmark Toronto Conference Declaration described the ultimate consequences of climate change as potentially second only to a global nuclear war. Despite such proclamations decades ago, climate catastrophe is relatively understudied and poorly understood. Did I share this? I did. Okay. Oh, hold on. Gotta change my title. The potential for catastrophic impacts depends on the magnitude and rate of climate change, the damage inflicted on the Earth and human systems, and the vulnerability and response of those affected systems. The extremes of these areas, such as high temperature, rising, and cascading impacts, are under-examined. As noted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, there have been few quantitative estimates of global aggregate impacts from warming of 3 degrees Celsius or above. Text mining of IPCC reports similarly found that coverage of temperature rises of 3 degrees Celsius or higher is underrepresented relative to their likelihood. Text mining analysis also suggests that over time, the coverage of IPCC reports has shifted towards temperature rise of 2 degrees Celsius and below. Researchers focused on the impacts of 1.5 Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius, and studies of how climate impacts could cascade or trigger larger crises are sparse. Yeah, so from what I've read, we're headed for RCP 8.5, which is one of the worst case scenarios, which ends up being about a 4.6 degree increase. I think this is by the end of 2100 or something like that. Some of the recent research we've covered here, we're looking at at least a 2 degree change by 2100. And we're already at what, 1.2 degree Celsius change since 1900 or something like that. So we're trying to keep it to 1.2, but we're definitely going to get to 1.5. And we're already seeing the damage that's being done throughout the world. We've got the flooding, the severe droughts, the severe heat, right? We've got record temperatures across the world. Amazon's on fire. The Arctic was on fire. Everything's on fire. Curly Bear, how you doing? Welcome. How you doing today? How's your weekend? You got here, yeah, pretty early. In the middle sometime. Good. Yeah, I've got a whole bunch of tech. We did sell our other property, so I was able to buy a bunch of. I'm good. I'm so busy. We sold our rental property, so I bought a whole bunch of streaming gear. I got a stream deck, a new microphone, standing desk, headphones, another monitor. So I'm good. Oh, and a Synology NAS. It's a large hard drive array for a backup. I have got a lot of stuff to do, and a computer for my daughter too, and a laptop for my wife, and all that stuff is here, and I still haven't had a chance to get any of it configured. I'm so busy. And then our yoga studio, the computer that we use to stream our classes, that decided to not send music to the people who are streaming. So I've got a lot of stuff to do and not enough time to do it. And this weekend, I've got Dungeons and Dragons tomorrow, so that's going to cut a lot of my time off too. So yeah, a lot of good stuff to do, just not enough time to do it. Not a parasite. I know, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to sell it. Like when I want to buy an electric car, but I can't really afford a full electric. For a long time I wanted a Tesla, but I know that if I bought a Tesla, all of you would disown me, so I can't do that. But I did find that Toyota has their BZ line, which is an all-electric line. So I've been looking at that. Yeah, I know. Yep, so we sold that. We're on a buying spree. And then, yeah, things are good. Things are very good. My the standing desk is motorized, so I have to, and one of the legs isn't put together properly, so I have to rip it apart and put it back together and try and fix that. So that's after I fix our studio's computer is what I'll be doing. So that way I get my standing desk up and running. Then I can move it here. Then I can move this over there and get my office into better shape. Yeah. So we're reading. We just started reading this article. It's from the National Academy of Sciences. It's going to be long. It's on the. Let's go back up here. Climate Endgame Exploring Catastrophic Climate Change Scenarios. It's a bit academic, but we're going to, and it's a large article too. You kind of see it up here, how much we have to go. This will probably take us an hour to get through. So it's going to be talking about that. All right. A thorough risk assessment would need to consider how risks spread, interact, amplify, and are aggravated by human responses. But even simpler compound hazard analyses of interacting climate hazards and drivers are underused. Yet this is how risk unfolds in the real world. For example, a cyclone destroys electrical infrastructure, leaving a population vulnerable to an ensuing deadly heat wave. Recently, we have seen compound hazards emerge between climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. As the IPCC notes, climate risks are becoming more complex and difficult to manage and are cascading across regions and sectors. Right, and the United States is a large part of this. As Curly Bear, you know that I talk about this here, that the United States is the largest terrorist organization in the world. We are also pretty much one of the largest polluters in the world, especially if you take into account how much damage our military does globally. I'm talking about the coups throughout Central and South America, what we did in Iraq, what we did in Afghanistan, what we're doing in the Ukraine. You know, we overthrow the countries, install a right-wing dictator, and then go to war. And as Abby Martin, she confronted Nancy Pelosi at the what the hell is it called? The COP26 in Scotland, and asked her, well, how can you honestly be here at an environmental conference if you're not willing to start looking at reducing military? Because military is one of the largest drivers of climate change. So if the United States gutted our military down to 75%, shifted that over to working on climate stuff, then we could get some actual progress towards fighting climate change. But that's not going to happen because there's too much profit to be had in war. And our country, the United States, is owned by corporations. All right. Why the focus on lower end warming and simple risk analyses? One reason is the benchmark of the international targets. The Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius with an aspiration of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Again, Paris Agreement, sure, it's good to have it, but it has zero teeth, so it's pretty much useless. Another reason is the culture of climate science to err on the side of the least drama, to not be alarmist, which can be compounded by the consensus process of the IPCC. Complex risk assessments, while more realistic, are also more difficult to do. This caution is understandable, yet it is mismatched to the risks and the potential damages posed by climate change. We know that temperature rises has fat tails, low probability, high impact, extreme outcomes. Climate damages are likely to be nonlinear and result in an even larger tail. Too much is at stake to refrain from examining high impact, low likelihood scenarios. The COVID-19 pandemic has underlined the need to consider and prepare for infrequent high impact global risks and the systemic dangers they can spark. prudent risk management demands that we thoroughly assess worst case scenarios. Yeah, and that's kind of what my policies kind of say. We need to start looking at exactly what sorts of harm that climate change can pose, and then we need to completely restructure our cities from the ground up to deal with that. I mean, we're gonna have flooding, possible earthquakes, fires everywhere, right? And also the increase in acidic rain. We really need to start looking at designing our buildings so that they can, well, uh, survive in an environment something a little bit like Venus, although not that extreme, like kind of like a baby step towards Venus, where slightly higher pressures, acidic rain, right, extreme heat, and we need to make it so that humanity can survive in that sort of environment, which mostly means getting humanity underground. Yeah, so that's something we need to be looking at. We need to be building up, and we need to be building down and not out like we're doing now. Go ahead and throw my policies in here so you can take a look at those if you get bored. My environmental policies are some of the biggest, it is my biggest policy. Our proposed climate endgame research agenda aims to direct exploration of the worst risks associated with anthropogenic climate change. To introduce it, we summarize existing evidence on the likelihood of extreme climate change, outline why exploring bad to worst cases is vital, suggest reasons for catastrophic concern, define key terms, and then explain the 4 key aspects of the research agenda. Worst case climate change. Despite 30 years of efforts on some progress under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, anthropogenic greenhouse gases, GHG, emissions continue to increase. Even without considering worst-case climate responses, the current trajectory puts the world on track for a temperature rise between 2.1 and 3.9 by 2100. Okay, so here we go. So the worst-case scenario that I was talking about last year or the year before was RCP 8.5, which is a 4.6 degree increase. Maybe this one is a bit more accurate at closer to 4 by 2100. If all 2030 nationally determined contributions are fully implemented, warming of 2.4 degrees Celsius, 1.9 to 3 degrees Celsius, is expected by 2100, meaning all long-term pledges and targets could reduce this to 2.1 or 1.7 to 2.6 degrees. Even these optimistic assumptions lead to dangerous Earth system trajectories. Temperatures of more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial values have not been sustained on Earth's surface since before the Pleistocene epoch, or more than 2.6 million years ago. Even if anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions start to decline soon, this does not rule out high future greenhouse gas concentrations or extreme climate change, particularly beyond 2100. There are feedbacks in the carbon cycle and potential tipping points that could generate high greenhouse gas concentrations. They're often missing from models. Examples include Arctic permafrost thawing that releases methane and CO2. Yeah, that's a huge fucking problem. Huge problem. Carbon loss due to intense droughts and fires in the Amazon, yep. And the apparent slowing of dampening feedback such as natural carbon sink capacity. Yeah, and one of the so that we're as far as I'm concerned, we are in the end times right now at climate scales. We've got these massive feedback loops, right? When something's on fire, like California or the Brazil or whatever, right? We have trees on fire, which mean the greenery goes away, which is some of your carbon sink goes away. And then 2, that thing being on fire puts more greenhouse gases in the air, more carbon dioxide in the air. So your ability to sink carbon goes down while the amount of greenhouse gases goes up. That's one of those feedback loops. And then as the temperature goes up, more things are on fire, more greenhouse gases, and then also you look at the temperature and pH increasing in the ocean. The ocean is the largest carbon sink for the world. And as that temperature and pH goes up, the eukaryotes and single-celled organisms there that do the carbon sinking end up dying. If that dies, we're totally fucked. I mean, that's happening right now. Like the pH has gone up enough that crab shells are dissolving. So it's happening. That's something that's happening now. So yeah, there's lots of feedback loops, and that's one of the reasons why I keep doing this finger thing. I need to put up a model, but because the temperature is going up like this, we have to be carbon negative to finally turn that down. We have to be severely carbon negative to turn that temperature down. Being carbon neutral isn't enough. We need to be carbon negative, severely carbon negative, to have any chance at saving humanity. It's just the way it is. Okay, these are likely to not be proportional to warming, as is sometimes assumed. Instead, abrupt and or irreversible changes may be triggered at a temperature threshold. Such changes are evident in Earth's geological record, and their impacts cascaded across the coupled climate ecological social system. Particularly worrying is a tipping cascade in which multiple tipping elements interact in such a way that tipping one threshold increases the likelihood of tipping another. Temperature rise is crucially dependent on the overall dynamics of the Earth system, not just the anthropogenic emissions trajectory. The potential for tipping points in higher concentrations, despite lower anthropogenic emissions, is evident in existing models. Variability among the latest coupled model intercomparison project phase 6, CMIP6, climate models result in overlap in different scenarios. For example, the top 75th quartile outcome of the middle of the road scenario, shared socioeconomic pathway 3-70 or SSP 3-70, is substantially hotter than the bottom 25th quartile of the highest emissions. Okay, so that's 8.5 scenario. Okay. Regional temperature differences between models can exceed 5 to 6 degrees Celsius, particularly in polar areas where various tipping points can occur. There are even more uncertain feedbacks in which a very worst case might amplify to an irreversible transition to a hothouse Earth state, although there may be negative feedbacks that help buffer the Earth system. In particular, poorly understood cloud feedbacks might trigger sudden and irreversible global warming. Such effects remain underexplored and largely speculative, unknown unknowns that are still being discovered. For instance, recent simulations suggest that stratocumulus cloud decks might abruptly be lost at CO2 concentrations that could be approached by the end of the century, causing an additional 8 degrees of Celsius global warming. Domino Big Boy, how you doing? Isn't the working theory that global warming is inevitable and was ongoing? Well, there's like a 10,000 year cycle that happens, and it does result in warming, yes. But what the studies show, much like you're saying, is that we are taking it far beyond what that 10,000 year cycle would be. So, I mean, it is so radically different. If you check my policies, there's a video in there that talks about this specifically. We are speeding it up, and it's going far beyond anything that then would have occurred naturally with the 10,000 year cycle. Yeah, so we're it's not good. It's not good. We are in the end times at climate scales. I mean, our children are going to know some of the greatest horrors we've ever seen over these next 100 years, and then it's just going to get significantly worse after that, because we're probably we're probably heading towards a 4-degree increase. This by what this article said, like RCP 8.5, which is about a 4-degree increase. By the end of the century, it's probably going to be a 2-degree increase. We're already seeing at about 1.2 degrees now. You got flash floods, everything's on fire, temperature increases, hitting hot bulb temperatures, right, and so on and so forth. And that's just the beginning. What's going to happen when we hit 1.5? It's going to not be good. And again, as we talked about earlier, there's going to be feedback loops, right? Things are on fire. Less greenery to act as a carbon sink, and also things on fire means more carbon dioxide in the air, which creates a a positive feedback loop so that this stuff keep getting hotter, drier, more fire, and it just keeps going like that. And it's just going to increase the speed or the rate at which the temperature increases, and it's going to increase the volatility of weather, volatility and severity of weather, more floods, more fires, more droughts, and all that sort of stuff. So yes, there's a cycle every 10,000 years, but what we are doing, what we have done to the carbon dioxide concentrations is far beyond anything in the natural cycle. Okay. Large uncertainties about dangerous surprises are reasons to prioritize rather than neglect them. Recent findings. I don't know if that's the one. It's actually, there's a name attached to it. What's that name? No, it's not the Ice Age cycle because it's talking about heating. It's this video here. It talks about it in here. I'll throw it in here so you can take a look at it. It's not the Ice Age cycles. It's about the heat cycles. Every 10,000 years, there's a heating. He talks about that in there. Yeah. Recent findings on equilibrium climate sensitivity, ECS, underline that the magnitude of climate change is uncertain even if we knew future greenhouse gas concentrations. According to the IPCC, our best estimate for ECS is a 3 degrees Celsius temperature rise per doubling of CO2, with a likely range of 66 to 100% likelihood of 2.5 degrees to 4 degrees Celsius. While an ECS below 1.5 degrees Celsius was essentially ruled out, there remains an 18% probability that ECS could be greater than 4.5 degrees Celsius. The distribution of ECS is heavy-tailed, with a higher probability of very high values of ECS than of very low values. Okay, what tells ECS? ECS is right here. Equilibrium climate sensitivity. So it's saying it's more likely that we're going to have a larger temperature increase than a smaller one. What you get right here. There is a significant uncertainty over future anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions as well. Representative concentration pathway 8.5. Here we go, RCP 8.5. Yep. Now SSP 8.5, the highest emissions pathway used in IPCC scenarios, most closely matches cumulative emissions to date. Right, and this is what I've been saying for 2 years now. We are at RCP 8.5, which is the worst case scenario, which is about a 4.6 degree increase by 2100. Now, they modified it here, I think, saying it's going to be about a 4 degree increase by 2100 under RCP 8.5, I think. This may not be the case going forward because of falling prices of renewable energy and policy responses, yet there remains reasons for caution in the United States. For instance, there is significant uncertainty over key variables such as energy demand and economic growth. Plausibly higher economic growth rates could make RCP 8.5 35% more likely. Yeah, and I think something of what I've read that the energy requirements are increasing by like 30%. I can't remember, it's over like the next decade or something like that. Yes, as we get more technology and as emerging markets, Central South America, Africa, India, are becoming more advanced, you got more technology, more energy, and of course, as they're, especially in the United States, as more people become rich, that means that their energy requirements go up significantly. Why explore climate catastrophe? In China, no intention of switching from fossil. Yeah, no, they are switching to sustainable energy. They're one of the biggest creators of solar energy and use of solar energy. right? Although, yes, they are using some of quite a bit of the fossil fuels too, and that is a problem, a huge problem. We need to get every single country off fossil fuels and over to sustainable energy. Would I say on the largest coal deposits? Oh, that sucks. That really sucks. We need to have people research and concentrate on geothermal, specifically ultra deep geothermal and tidal wave and stream energy. And then you can also go to something like high altitude wind turbine or power satellites. Those are kind of the four things we need to be concentrating for base load power. Just a second, the wife just texted me. Then you can use solar. And solar and wind as intermittent energy. Yeah, and then that's also a problem with like Africa and India. They're going to be using fossil fuels, and that's one of the reasons why I say the U.S. along with the EU needs to put in like trillions and trillions of dollars, part of that as reparations to the global South, so that they can skip the fossil fuel era and go straight into the sustainable energy era. Without us doing that, I mean, they're basically voting for human extinction. It's just ridiculous. Not only is it a moral thing because we've been looting and murdering and destroying their countries and stealing their people and stealing their resources and leaving them impoverished, but it's also, if we want humanity to survive, we need to do it. It's a survival imperative, and it's also a moral imperative to do that, but it's never going to happen. I know, right? And Alex, man, how you doing? Good to see you. I LGGBDDIQAPP. Once is enough. How you doing, dude? We're reading this fairly large paper on climate change and the analysis models. I'll throw it in there. I'm good. I'm good. I got a whole bunch of technology because we sold our rental property. Got new headphones, new monitor, new microphone, standing desk, which I have to finish putting it together correctly. Yeah, lots of stuff. I'm great. Busy though. Busy though. Oh, got my daughter a computer, my wife a computer. Got us a Synology NAS to store our data on. But I've got all that stuff, but none of that stuff is configured and put together and ready to be used yet. I've got all that stuff to do. In addition to our yoga studio's computer is no longer sending music to the people who are on Zoom. So good, very busy, very busy. And we're reading about the end of humanity. So got to balance that a little bit. Okay. Why do we need to know about the plausible worst cases? First, risk management and robust decision-making under uncertainty requires knowledge of extremes. For example, the Minimax criterion ranks policies by their worst outcomes. Such an approach is particularly appropriate for areas characterized by high uncertainties and tail risks. Emissions, trajectories, future concentrations, future warming, and future impacts are all characterized by uncertainty. That is, we can't objectively prescribe probabilities to different outcomes. Climate. Am I telling you that there's climate change going on? I'm not telling you. Climate scientists are telling you that it is, and this is just talking about the analysis of how we should analyze this. But sure, yes, climate change is a thing. Such an approach is particularly appropriate. Okay, I showed that. Climate damages lie within the realm of deep uncertainty. We don't know the probabilities attached to different timing or desirability of outcomes. Uncertainty, deep or not, should motivate precaution and vigilance, not complacency. Right. And again, my policies say we should be doing this modeling and figuring out what the worst case models are and basically start working towards redesigning our infrastructure from the ground up to be able to survive that. Never believe those scientists. Before you know it, they'll send you back in a time machine. Well, that would be cool. Then we can prevent all this. I mean, we've known about climate change since like 1830 or some shit like that. A long time ago. And we could raise the alarm. Not that, anyone would listen. It's like being, was it Pandora? Not Pandora. Callisto? Who was that? She was a prophetic. Whenever she told a prophecy, no one would believe her. Yeah, that same thing would happen. We'd talk about it, no one would listen, just like it's happening now. All right. Catastrophic impacts, even if unlikely, have major implications for economic analysis, modeling, and society's response. For example, extreme warming and the consequent damages can significantly increase the projected social cost of carbon. Understanding the vulnerability and responses of human societies can inform policymaking and decision-making to prevent systemic crises. Indicators of key variables can provide early warning signals. Now, all this is good, what they're talking about. Call the fire department 5 times in a row. See if they still believe you. Well, they wouldn't have to because weather is not the same as climate. It's difficult. It's hard for people because our brains aren't built to understand things from the standpoint of long-term trends. We're more very hyper-localized in our understanding. So those 5 times wouldn't mean much to them. They'd just be annoyed at you that you're calling wolf. But if we can get people to understand systemic and structural mindset towards looking at climate and economics and stuff like that, things can radically change. It's just a matter of getting people beyond that weather and into the climate structural and systemic thinking. Yeah, so all this is good, but it's just if the countries aren't doing anything on this, especially the United States, it's just if countries really cared, a lot of things would be changing. And a lot of countries would be embargoing the United States and putting significant pressure upon the United States. But no one's doing that. So no one is truly serious. I'm building a supercomputer. I don't have the money to do that. I've got a nice computer, but nowhere near a supercomputer. I don't have the data analytics background to do that. But that'd be interesting, though. The data isn't the problem. We have the data. The issue is getting it across to people in a way that they understand and feel like they can do something about it. I think we do. Yes. The United States is fucking stupid. Stupid in love with oil. It's a matter of putting that data. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Compared to 1984, it is. Oh, definitely. I have enough power in my computer. Yeah, definitely. Even farther back than that. I think there's more than enough power in this to be beyond like a Cray or something like that. Back in the day. Yeah, the United States has to be the leader in climate change. Otherwise, we're screwed. Okay. Knowing the worst cases can compel action, as the idea of a nuclear winter in 1983 galvanized public concern and nuclear disarmament efforts. Exploring severe risks and higher temperature scenarios could cement a recommitment to the 1.5 to 2 degree Celsius guardrail. No, so here's why this won't work. Because this here, holy shit, sorry. That was crazy. Why this won't work is because there was a definite enemy. It was Russia. Climate change doesn't have an enemy. Could arm wrestle, then I would accept the challenge. I would too. I enjoy arm wrestling. I suck at it, but but I enjoy it. So, like with the Cold War, there was a definite enemy. It was Russia, right? Communism, socialism. But here, with climate change, there isn't one country that's doing it. It's not, there isn't a defined enemy or super villain doing this. It's, again, it's a part of that people don't think in systemic and structural, don't think systemically and structurally, so they can't, it's hard for them to understand this. Or even to have a clue how to approach, solving it. Understanding catastrophic climate scenarios can also inform policy interventions, including last resort emergency measures like solar radiation management, the injection of aerosols into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight. Whether to resort to such measures depends on the risk profiles of both climate change and SRM scenarios. One recent analysis of the potential catastrophic risk of stratospheric aerosol injection found that the direct systemic impacts are understudied, of course. The largest danger appears to come from termination shocks, abrupt and rapid warming if the SAI system is disrupted. It's a stratospheric aerosol injection. Hence, the stratospheric atmospheric injection shifts the risk distribution. The median outcome may be better than the climate change it is offsetting, but the tail risk could be worse than warming. I understand nothing that I do as an individual. Well, right, as an individual, correct. And it's understanding that we have to act as a collective to put pressure on Congress and the governments. I mean, mass demonstrations, like we were talking about. You read this article. I know we've read this before. The 3.5% is what it takes to 3.5% of the population, what it takes to get change. You as an individual can't, but 3.5% of the world could do something. And that requires a large umbrella organization to get leftists and progressives and people who care about the climate together globally to start global protests and bring the entire world to a halt until the United States and other countries take this fucking seriously. I mean, if, like, the people in Europe were serious about climate change, they would be talking BDS of the United States. If they're not talking BDS of the United States, they're not serious. They're not really serious about climate change because the United States has to be there and be a part of the solution, or it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. So I'm giving you and the rest of you Europeans permission as an American to BDS us into submission. There are other interventions that a better understanding of catastrophic climate change could facilitate. For example, at the international level, there is the potential for a tail risk treaty, an agreement or protocol to activate stronger commitments and mechanisms when early warning indicators of potential abrupt change are triggered. But that's already too late. Once the change is already there and it's going to happen, you're already fucked. Congress. I don't have a Congress, yes. I doubt even that if the U.S. would stop completely tomorrow with CO2. Yeah, it wouldn't. It would really take Europe BDSing and the people of the United States also protesting. They would take both of them to get the U.S. to change. If it's not both, if our economics are not challenged, especially by the West, Europe, then they're not going to listen to anything. And if Europe is BDSing us and protesting the street, and our people are also protesting, I think that could possibly get some change here in the United States. But it would have to be a giant ass 3.5% or more of the country to uproot the corporate-owned candidates in Congress. I can only hope. Even Europe and the U.S. together, then we don't talk about. Oh, right, sure. It's less about the population and about the energy demand. The United States, Europe has the majority of the energy demand in the world. Now, of course, China is a large polluter, of course, but if Europe and the U.S. was on board, we could get China on board too. That wouldn't be too hard because we would also be providing the treaties and the technology and the trade to make it happen. It could be. It could be. I really wish things would change. I wish I could switch from a doomer to someone um, who has a positive outlook, but I'm still sitting at human extinction in the next 200 years. Oh, over the coming decade is that's not enough. That's not going to get the U.S. to change anything. Yeah, India. Wasn't it India at COP26 that lobbied to reduce the language in the COP26's document to reduce coal from phase out to reduction or something like that? I think it was India that did that. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's in my post on it. If only. If something happens over the next 5 years, maybe something will make a difference. But other than that, basically need to be carbon negative by 2030 or we're fucked. Severely carbon negative or we're fucked. There are 4 key reasons to be concerned over the potential of a global climate catastrophe. First, there are warnings from history. Climate change, either regional or global, has played a role in the collapse or transformation of numerous previous societies. And in each of the 5 mass extinction events in the Phanerozoic Earth history, the current carbon pulse is occurring at an unprecedented geological speed, and by the end of the century may surpass thresholds that triggered previous mass extinctions. The worst case scenario in the IPCC report project temperatures by the 22nd century that last prevailed in the early Eocene, reversing 50 million years of cooler climates in the space of 2 centuries. China has a horrible regime, but so what's the U.S.'s current carbon reduction target? Good question. I don't think it really matters because they're not really doing anything. But let's see. Reduce emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels. Yeah, so by 2050, I think this is. Yeah, we looked at Biden's plan, which is horrific. If you're not looking at, yeah, see right here, by 2050. If you're not aiming for like carbon negative by 2030, it's pointless. The 50 to 52% reduction from 2005 levels by 2050. That's what it is. Domino, big boy. Let's see. China has a horrible regime, but at least there's some structure there. I doubt India has the same. Right, and that's why I say the United States and Europe has to give trillions to the global South, right? To India, Africa, places we've raided and looted for hundreds of years, in the Middle East, right? We need to not only pay reparations to the global South, but also because that's a moral imperative, but also and a survival imperative is to give them trillions of dollars so that they can shift to sustainable energy. So we can help, and also carbon negative techniques as well. Again, Europe and the United States has the ability to do a lot of that, but we're not going to. So yeah, let's read this last sentence again. The worst case scenarios in the IPCC report project temperatures by the 22nd century, 2200, that last prevailed in the early Eocene, reversing 50 million years of cooler climates in the space of 2 centuries. So by 2200, we're going to see temperatures that have undone 50 million years of cooling. We'll have undone 50 million years of climate cooling in the space of 200 years. Or no, it's not by 2200. Yeah, it is right. It is right. Yep. That's how much we are destroying the environment. This is particularly alarming as human societies are locally adapted to a specific climatic niche. The rise of large-scale urbanized agrarian societies began with the shift to the stable climate of the Holocene about approximately 12,000 years ago. That countries are lying about their CO2 emissions. You can measure the global amount of CO2 in the air, and that does not match. I bet a lot of them are, like the U.S. is. I'm pretty sure. I mean, because no one wants to be held accountable for that, because we're all it's bad. It's super bad. If people aren't being honest, then there's no way to really end it. And of course, a lot of that has to do with competition and stuff like that. Yep. So it's much worse than we make it out than it is. Than people are making it out to be. Right, the Holocene. So that's something I talk about, right? Everything changes from that shift from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic. The Holocene is the Neolithic revolution, the agrarian revolution. 12,000 years ago, the shift from hunting and gathering to farming. That's when everything changed. Since then, human population density peaked within a narrow climatic envelope with a mean annual average temperature of approximately 13 degrees Celsius. Even today, the most economically productive centers of human activity are concentrated in those areas. The cumulative impacts of warming may overwhelm societal adaptive capacity. True statement. Good news is that you can simply measure. Yeah, well, that's good to know. Um, this is really it. Well. Okay, so we could as a society adapt to that. But pretty much, you have to take climate change seriously, and you have to start looking at the worst possible case scenarios. My policies pretty much talk about what we need to do. Again, as I've said earlier, we need to do these studies, figure out what the worst case scenario is, and redesign our infrastructure to compensate for that. There's going to be fires, droughts, underground, vertical farming. Having our cities underground and doing a lot of vertical farming is going to be a large part of it. And start greening the shit out of the rest of the planet. That's what we're gonna have to do. I'll throw my policies in here again. Want to see what I recommend? There's a lot here. It's my largest policy because it's so important. We could do it. Again, part of that trillions and trillions of dollars we need to send to global south. We also individually, like to Europe and the United States, need to be sending trillions and trillions of dollars to adapt to climate change and what's going to happen, because we're having droughts, right? Record temperatures. We're going to be losing our food supply and other supplies. So we need to find ways to make sure we have our survival supplies in an environment that is going to be antithetical to their existence. You've got droughts and record temperatures. You've got clams baking in the water, wheat baking in the field, berries baking in on the vine, right? We need to create an infrastructure that means we can grow those things without being destroyed by the climate. That requires massive adaptation. That's what my policies look at doing. Second, climate change could directly trigger other catastrophic risks, such as international conflict, or exacerbate infectious disease spread, which we're seeing, and spillover risk. These could be potent extreme threat multipliers. Right, and that's, our policies say we need to study all these things and see, how many diseases are we going to unleash? Because there's going to be a lot. Not just because, the permafrost is thawing and all the viruses and bacteria are coming out of there and into the air, but also because the temperature increases globally, the diseases in the south are going to start shifting to the north because the climate is appropriate for them to survive. And then we're going to have to deal with all the diseases from the global south, in addition to the ones coming from the north due to thawing. So the center here is going to be horrible. To do what you have in mind, I think the most important part is the workforce that is needed. Okay, true. You have a lot of money, but if there's no people that can put solar panels on roofs, then it goes slow. If you want to order solar panels here, right. You're exactly right. That is an issue. But the training can be done. You can have one person, one group doing virtual trainings and record videos and send it to, and then they can play it to teach those people, right, how to do that. But right, supplies is going to be an issue, and that's one of the reasons why the solar panels isn't the way to go. A, because it requires a lot of rare earth minerals, but also because it's intermittent. Again, geothermal, tidal wave, an ocean stream, and then high altitude wind turbines and power satellites. That's what we need to be concentrating on for um, base load power. And that's something that every country could open up their patents for. Say, boom, here you go. And then countries could start. Well, you can, but that's not what. But they won't want to do it. I mean, it's going to be come down to like with Central and South America, or Central South America, Africa, India. People are going to want to do work because they're suffering and poverty and all sorts of stuff, right? In those areas, it'll be easy. In developed in first world countries, it can be a lot of people want to change jobs too and can't because they don't have the money to do so because it's expensive to retrain yourself. But you provide free training, much like the federal jobs guarantee, right? If you don't have a job, guess what? Not only, although the federal jobs guarantee typically operates off paying a wage less than what the public does, so here you could pay more than the public does. So start at $30 an hour for the federal jobs guarantee to do this sustainable stuff. Then you'll get a lot of people going there. Of course, you'll lose all these people to other service industries, right? Walmart, grocery stores and restaurants and stuff like that. But those are things that should be automated anyhow. So that'll end up being a net positive. Well, it'll be. I'm not sure how that'll go. If Walmart and McDonald's automate everything, it's a lot less jobs. So it's a mixed blessing. It's only a mixed blessing within capitalism. We can do it. Just throw the trillions at it. We can get it done. Third, climate change could exacerbate vulnerabilities and cause multiple indirect stresses such as economic damage, loss of land, and water and food insecurity. Yep, already happening. That coalesce into system-wide synchronous failures. Yep. Managers typically still get paid more than somebody who's placing. Yes, yeah, you're very right, and that's why I pretty much advocate for. Well, I don't say this in my policies necessarily, but the minimum wage should be basically, well, at this point, probably $75,000 a year, and then the maximum wage is 9 times that, which is $675,000, and then 100% marginal tax rate at that, which means the take home is going to be, roughly $250,000. However, I think the end result we should be aiming for, which is not in my policies, is that everyone makes the exact same amount of money. Same money for everyone. 70 grand, 80 grand for everyone. Managers get paid the same. People doing the manual installation get paid the same. Everyone gets paid the same. So that's something that can be dealt with. That should be part of the change as well. Yeah, some people do prefer to be management. Some people don't want to do the work. I don't want to do the work. Not at all. If I'm not in front of a computer, I'm miserable. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So yeah, pay them right and then they'll come. If you pay them, they will come. Yeah, yep, you could. But if it meant the difference between humanity surviving and not, a lot of people are going to probably step up and do something. And that's gonna be part of the marketing. It's part of that issue that we have where people don't understand what's at stake here. Like human civilization, human extinction is what we are looking at. And it needs to be, there needs to be a unified message from not just scientists, but also from the government in pushing these sorts of programs. And it needs to be so that the countries are working together in saving humanity from extinction. Can't just be one country, right? The U.S. and Europe working together, throwing these trillions to their own countries and trillions to the global south to do it. That's what it's going to take. And a unified message from all of them. And actually, not just the message. Messaging doesn't mean as much as unified action. You need unified message from the global north and unified action from the global north will help make all that happen. Okay. Global crises tend to occur through such reinforcing synchronous failures that spread across countries and systems, as with the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. It is plausible that a sudden shift in climate could trigger system failures that unravel societies across the globe. Right, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And this next 50 years, we're going to have severe droughts, severe food shortages, water shortages, everything shortages, and those who are going to be affected by it in the most, of course, the global south, are going to start running to the global north, and we're not going to have the infrastructure in place to deal with it. Again, my policies, you need to look at how this is going to affect the entire world and start working towards fixing that, making sure the infrastructure in each of those countries is resilient enough to take some of the most extreme, like RCP 8.5, that projected worst case scenario. If that happens in India, well, how do we redesign our infrastructure so that they still have a country left? How do they feed the people? Water and all that sort of stuff. That's what they should be looking at right now, and that is what they should be planning on building to right now. If they're not doing that, they're voting for extinction. I'll be extinct in a few decades. Well, right. I'll be extinct in a little more than that, hopefully. I'm almost 50, so I'm hoping I'll survive another 30 years or so. But I have a daughter, right? It's about, well, the perpetuation of the human race. That's something you should hopefully care about. Or if you have children or your friends and family have children, hopefully wanting them to survive and not have to deal with the greatest horrors humanity's ever seen. I would hope that would be something that you'd, care about, right? So that would be a good reason. Trying to save humanity. Trying to do your part. Trying to be part of the solution. And you've got some significant skills, right? You're very much into servers and computers and stuff like that. Oh my god. Speaking of that, fucking Gaming Mind. This is last year sometime, I think. He saved this article. He shared this video talking about how Microsoft and Google were helping fossil fuel industry to. They were helping them by using their AI technology to increase the efficiency of fossil fuel, operations. I was so pissed. Microsoft, Google, Amazon should be using all of their, their AI and their computing power to work towards solving, climate change, creating sustainable energy, and all that sort of stuff. They shouldn't be helping the fucking fossil fuel industry. Oh my god, the rage. The potential of systemic climate risk is marked. The most vulnerable states and communities will continue to be the hardest hit in a warming world, exacerbating inequities. Figure 1 shows how projected population density intersects with extreme greater than 29 degrees Celsius mean annual temperature. Such temperatures are currently restricted to only 0.8% of the Earth's land surface area. Using the medium-high scenario of emissions and population growth, by 2070, around 2 billion people are expected to live in these extremely hot areas. Currently, only 30 million people live in hot places, primarily in the Sahara and Gulf Desert. Yeah, so people, in this band are going to be the ones who are hit the worst. So the ones that are the cross slashed here, these are the areas that are going to be hit the worst. And they're going to be going north. Going north. And actually, to an extent, sending money to, those trillions of dollars to the global south, that is a form of defense. Because if they are running up to the north, if people from South America are running up to the United States, and we can't feed them, we don't have housing, there's going to be riots and violence and all sorts of horrible things. Whereas if we threw those trillions of dollars to South America and help them make sure that they have the infrastructure to feed their people, house their people, cool their people, and all that sort of stuff, that then they can take care of it. But if we allow, you know, pretty much a Malthusian Darwinism, allow them to die off and murder them as they come to the border because Kamala said, don't come. Why would I care about your children? Why I apparently do not care so much about children dying at this moment in Africa. Just to make a point, of course. If anything, that people simply don't care. Well, right, that is true. And part of that is because, again, I'll get back to people don't think in systemic ways or structural ways. They don't understand this, the effect of what is the potential outcome here. All they know is weather, and that's it. They don't think that they can do anything or what they should do. This is really about our children and their children's children if they for some reason decide to have them. And part of that lack of potential not caring about children or the survival of humanity comes from capitalism, because it's very much the disease of separation. It requires us to not think collectively. It requires us to be competitive and therefore sociopathic. So that sociopathy about not caring about children or survival is an inherent feature of capitalism. And it's just showing kind of the psychological and sociological harm that capitalism does. And that could be undone by a new education system concentrating on solidarity and collectivism, and an education based on interdependence. Interdependence is the key, because that is antithetical to capitalism. Because capitalism is about separation, resource-based economy. My policies are about interdependence. Humanity is interdependent with itself and with the environment, and that's what we need to be teaching. If we had a society built upon that, then they would have the right base values to be asking the right questions and to make the right decisions to solve the problem in the way that it needs to be. But unfortunately, we're under capitalism, therefore, not going to happen. Just like you would tell me about your new computer, but not how. No, I'm here talking to you and everyone, people on my channel. I'm trying to do my part. Everyone has their part, things that they can do. For me, it's trying to educate others. I blog about it. I'm here telling you we're all going to die. Humanity's going extinct. That we need to be doing things. That's my part. That is my part. Yeah, we don't really know how many people we save. If I can just if I can get through to one person per year to see that capitalism is the problem, that we need to be shifting to something else, I have convinced a few people, one or two maybe. That is some change. It takes time to do that, because getting people to think of capitalism as the problem and to really consider something else as a solution is very difficult, because you pretty much have to question your entire worldview to do that. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, people here, Africa, India, here in the Middle East, and they're all going to have to go up here to Europe. All these guys up here, China, and so on. So if those countries want to prevent that from happening, they need to be sending trillions of dollars down there to fix the South. All right, figure 2. It takes a political lens on extreme heat, overlapping SSP 7.0 and 8.5. So this RCP 7 and 8.5 projections of greater than 29 degrees Celsius by about 2070. Jesus Christ. With the Fragile States Index, a measurement of the instability of states, there's a striking overlap between currently vulnerable states and future areas of extreme warming. If current political fragility does not improve significantly in the coming decades, then the belt of instability with potentially serious ramifications could occur. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty much everywhere where there's inequality and people suffering, that's where there's going to be massive political upheaval. I have to admit that I did some changes in my life, and you were, oh, really? Oh, good to hear, I think. What was that? What were those changes? I don't fly to my holiday location. Oh, okay. Okay, so you cut back on flying. Okay, well that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, flying is a big. I lost an article on that I wanted to cover. Um, but yeah, flying is a big problem, especially because we have rich people, corporations have their own personal jets and stuff like that. That is private jets is a huge part of the problem. That's another industry that greatly needs to shift to sustainable energy. It's difficult because we don't have things that have the energy density to shift to like all electric engines or something like that. But even getting rid of, not necessarily getting rid of all planes, but going to blimps, or they got some ocean going stuff that are all electric we could do to transport stuff. I mean, we would have to greatly slow down our economies to, start dropping planes and shift to more sustainable alternatives. One of those ways, of course, part of my policies is we need to start looking at. You might reconsider. If I could do that, I might too. Is we need to start working towards hyper localizing production instead of shipping stuff all over the fucking planet. We need to work towards like each country, city, county, whatever, being as self-sustainable as possible. That'll help keep us from shipping and flying stuff all over the fucking place. It's another part of it, because if every country, especially down here in these belts, were self-sustainable and there's high levels of equality, this wouldn't be so bad. Finally, climate change could irrevocably undermine humanity's ability to recover from another cataclysm, such as nuclear war. That is, it could create significant latent risks. Impacts that may be manageable during times of stability become dire when responding to and recovering from a catastrophe. These different causes for catastrophic concern are interrelated and must be examined together. Not too long, but there's quite a bit to it. Latent risk, system risk. Okay, I'm not going to read through all that. Okay, defining the key terms. Although bad to worst case scenarios remain underexplored in the scientific literature, statements labeling climate change as catastrophic are not uncommon. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called climate change an existential threat. Academic studies have warned that warming above 5 degrees Celsius is likely to be beyond catastrophic, and above 6 degrees Celsius constitutes an indisputable global catastrophe. Current discussions over climate catastrophe are undermined by unclear terminology. The term catastrophic climate change has not been conclusively defined. Okay? An existential risk is usually defined as a risk that caused an enduring and significant loss of long-term human potential. This existing definition is deeply ambiguous and requires societal discussion and specification of long-term human values. Fair? While a democratic exploration of values is welcome, it is not required to understand pathways to human catastrophe or extinction. For now, the existing definition is not a solid foundation for scientific inquiry. Okay, fair. We offer clarified working definitions of such terms in Table 1 above. This is an initial step toward creating a lexicon for global calamity. Some of the terms, such as what constitutes a plausible risk or a significant contributor, are necessarily ambiguous. Others, such as thresholding at 10 or 25% of global population, are partly arbitrary. 10% is intended as a marker for a precedented loss. 25% is intended as an unprecedented decrease. For further research is needed to sharpen these definitions. The thresholds for global catastrophic and decimation risks are intended as general heuristics and not concrete numerical boundaries. Other factors such as morbidity and cultural and economic loss need to be considered. But flying is only one of the many things. I eat more local dishes, don't use as much plastic bags, but a linen bag, I turn my computer in sleep mode. Okay, awesome. Good for you, dude. Good for you. Yeah, it's difficult. To know what to do and to even do it, to change your life. I'm doing not major yet, but slowly change. Yeah, it takes time. It does take time. very much. But it's good that you're doing it. I'm glad that I've had that positive effect on you. Thank you so much. Hopefully, others in the Netherlands are following your example. If only the United States, people in the United States could follow that example too. We defined risk as the probability that exposure to climate change impacts and responses will result in adverse consequences for human or ecological systems. For the climate endgame agenda, we are particularly interested in catastrophic consequences. Any risk is compromised of four determinants: hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and response. Most of them are far, far ahead of you? Okay. Well, at least you know that you want to make the change, you are making the change, and it just takes time to get there. You're the one who says it. Okay, because you're okay, yeah, okay, all right. Right. I mean, compared to the United States, you're definitely not. You're still a capitalist, but you still care about the things that matter, right? But yeah, compared to the United States, you're definitely still actually left. Basically, center right, center left, somewhere around there. Because you're a part of the Netherlands, which lives off eco-humanistic values, which is why you're looking at making some changes, which is awesome. Oh, Eddie Wally 99, thank you so much for the follow. Glad you found something of value. Where are you from? I'm from Wisconsin, in the United States, and we're covering this article from the National Academy of Sciences talking about, but that's because U.S. journals are here. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Yes, Belgium. Oh, how you doing? What's it like there? Yeah, U.S. politics it's we are our politics is completely right wing, far right lunatic fringe and center right. We have no left leaning major political party in the country. Yep, yep. I'm not sure what it's like here. I don't go outside. Actually, I was outside today. It wasn't too bad. What was it like? What is it out like today? 89, 57% humidity. It's pretty clear this morning. Wasn't too bad this morning, but it's definitely looking a little hot. I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing okay. I'm middle class, fortunately. A little more left in the Netherlands, really? Well, that's interesting. Yeah, we're good here. We're fortunately my family and I are doing well. We're in south central Wisconsin, so we're in a nice temperature band. So things aren't too bad here. Some of the people I work with, they're in Utah, in Texas. For them, it's really bad, really heat. It's really hot in those areas. Like Utah, where the place I work for is based out of, they've had fires in that area, and they're just ridiculous amounts of smoke going through and giving people respiratory issues. The Dutch part of Belgium is pretty right wing. Ah, interesting. French part of Belgium is very left. Okay, interesting. So what you think Netherlands is moving fast to the left? That would be nice. So what Eddie, what is left in Belgium? What sorts of things are you guys talking about? Anaholics. How do you see Netherlands moving fast to the left? What are they doing that makes it a nice fast movement? Vodka, water. I haven't alcohol in such a long time. I'm an introvert, so I'm a social drinker, and because of COVID, I'm not at all social. United States is still moving to the right because that's what we do. Murdering everyone globally for fun and corporate profit. Biggest party of the French part in Belgium are socialists. Okay, we're seeing big rise of communists. Oh, okay. Like how big of a rise of communists? That's a big deal. Socialists, I expect. Grizzly Bear. We're celebrating the end of humanity. That's what we're celebrating. What's far right? The agenda of the UN agenda thing? Can you give me, Eddie, can you give me examples of what is right and what is left policy? So I can kind of meter in what it is there? Because the United States is very different, obviously, because we're all right wing. The agenda, remind me, Alex, about that. Oh, are you talking about the Green Party? Their agenda? Is that thing? Is that what you're referring to, Alex? Wants Flemish independence, so they're against the French part. Okay, national. Okay, okay, okay. All right, cool. Gotcha, gotcha. Thanks for that. Okay. A judge ruled that the government is responsible for the well-being of the people. Oh yeah, yeah. There's that lawsuit. Yeah. Did we cover that? I think I think you covered that. Probably because you shared that with us a while ago. Okay, yeah. That's a cool thing. That is a cool thing. That's exactly what we need to have done. Communist Party doubled their votes since 2014. Okay, cool. Well, good to hear. Good to hear. Leftism is rarely well organized, so it's good that there's this shift towards leftism. Hopefully, that'll mean some significant changes. I mean, those countries over there are pretty small, but so if you want some policy here, have your people start talking about BDSing the United States until we get on board the climate bus. As an American, I'm telling you that. Please do it. I'm willing to take a hit for the team so we can save humanity from extinction. Yeah, BDS the Arabic countries, BDS Israel, BDS the United States. Get some. I have to fix my background. It's not quite right. It's cutting off my head. I have fabric on the wall, which doesn't. It's not quite sitting properly. So I need to get um some sort of maybe green paper on the background. You can kind of see right over here. No, you can't see it. But the ruling has a lot of impact on a lot of things. So they're going, oh, really? Okay, cool. Well, that's that. I would hope that would be the case. I mean, the best possible scenario is, if the judge says you have to reduce CO2 emissions, then they go nuts on it. That's awesome. That is awesome. And one of those ways, farm to the farmers, um, hopefully some of that will be put into effect through the economies for the common good, so that if the United States is also not doing similarly, that they can start increasing taxes on us or restricting trade to the United States, because we are significantly violating, well, those sorts of reductions. There's another room, but it's sort of saying, okay, cool, awesome. You guys have had two. That's cool. I wish we could get even one. Even half of one would be nice, because there'd be some sort of conversation about it. Um, but it's not going to happen here. Fossil fuel industry owns it all. All right, we have set global warming of 3 degrees Celsius or more by the end of the century as a marker for extreme climate change. This threshold is chosen for 4 reasons. Such a temperature rise well exceeds internationally agreed targets. All the IPCC reasons for concern in climate impacts are either high or very high risk between 2 and 3 degrees Celsius. There are substantially heightened risks of self-amplifying changes that would make it impossible to limit warming to 3 degrees Celsius, and these levels relate to far greater uncertainty in impacts. Emissions of nitrous oxide? No. Like mononitrogen hydride? There's a lot of debate about nuclear energy. Okay. Yeah, I'm generally against it. I was a nuclear reactor operator in the Navy, U.S. Navy, so I'm basically against it. Ammonium. Okay, thank you. Okay, makes sense. But what I say in my policies is we shouldn't be building more, but any reactors that are currently in operation, get them to go as long as possible and then decommission them when they're done. I know in this whole conversation, it's, people are either for it or they're definitely against it. Nuclear power, I'm on the against it level. And I know there's going to be a lot of debates about that. On some of the channels I watch, they cover videos on that. There's some neat nuclear stuff coming out there, like thorium reactors. There's one I just saw on, can't remember what it was called, but I shared it. Did I share it? I shared it into Discord. Yeah. All right. Key research thus far. The closest attempts to directly study or comprehensively address how climate change could lead to human extinction or global catastrophe have come through popular science books such as The Uninhabitable Earth or Our Final Warning. The latter, a review of climate impacts at different degrees, concludes that a global temperature rise of 6 degrees Celsius imperils even the survival of humans as a species. Problem is that if we do everything we can, we might still be late. So if nuclear can help, then go for it. Right here, the Greens want them gone as well, but they want their place. Yeah, and that's fucking stupid. Okay, so and yeah, I understand that, and I would be hard pressed to be convinced of going that way, but I could be convinced if that's really what it took. Eddie, I would have to see the studies on that. I mean, nuclear versus gas plants. Instead of gas plants, they should be doing geothermal. Geothermal, tidal. Actually, you guys are landlocked, right? So it's geothermal, high altitude wind turbines, high altitude solar. That's what they should be doing. And geothermal too. Yeah, I get that. Not a fan of gas plants. Yeah, that's what some places are doing. They're getting rid of coal and using, quote, clean natural gas plants. That's not a step in the right direction. Yikes. Yikes. I think it's, I don't think it's going to be much lower than 6 degrees that will imperil us. I mean, pretty much if we get to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, the feedback loops are going to be enough to pretty much take humanity down to all life on the planet down to next to nothing. You're replacing this moment large wind turbine. Okay, cool. Yeah. You guys out there are doing a lot of that. You should combine that. There's a lot of neat tidal and wave technology that's coming out there too. You can use that. If you go into my Discord in the environmental, there was something covered last week, I think it was. It's taking there's underwater. It's a way of taking energy. I think it's using tidal or wave energy and using weights to store that energy, so you can put out the energy over time. So you could use something like that in addition to wave and stream production, along with these weights to store that energy, so it can be put out at over a longer period of time to reduce the effects of intermittency of wind power. Yep, cool. We know that health risks worsen with rising temperatures. For example, there's already increasing probability of multiple breadbasket failures causing a food price shock with higher temperatures. For the top 4 maize-producing regions, accounting for 87% of maize production, the likelihood of production losses greater than 10% jumps from 7% annually under 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise to 86% under 4 degrees Celsius. Yeah, so this is why, again, I'm saying, I've said before, I haven't said in this stream yet that we need to be taking our farmland, taking 10% of it and turning it into vertical farm. And then multi-story vertical farms. Go below the ground, go above the ground, and then you can get 10 times the food out of that same amount of space with 10% of the water requirements, and then you can green the rest of that 90% of that farm, turn it into greenland. And that's what every single country in the world needs to be doing if they want to have food. That's in my policies too. Actually, do I put that in there? 10%? I don't know if I put that 10% in there. I'm pretty sure I do, but I'm going to check. Of durable energy from these sources that you need energy when the sun. Right. Which is why I don't talk about solar and wind power as baseload power. You need hydro, geothermal, altitude, wind, and stream, and ocean tidal power for baseload energy. Belgium is going to place solar panels on the North Sea to let them float between wind turbines. Sure, that's one way to do it. So of course, that's going to have the intermittency issues with solar panels. Doing high altitude solar might be a better way to do it in the long run because you get 24-hour a day sun. The high altitude, not altitude, power satellites are a way of doing that. So you got a satellite with a shitload of solar panels on it, then you beam the power down. That's one way. High altitude solar or power satellites are the way you can use solar as a baseload power supply. You need anything that works, but like I said, it's hard to get people. Right. Again, the government could do that. They could, again, federal jobs guarantee, pay people a shitload of money, and then people will come and do it. As long as you combine that with a message of we're trying to have humanity survive, it could be done. It can definitely be done. Right message, right money, and anything is possible. All right. So yeah, 86% of maize loss over between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius, and we are easily going to see 3 degrees Celsius rise by 2100. So if countries are not shifting to underground and vertical farming, they're voting for human extinction. I mean, it's that simple. The IPCC notes in its 6th assessment report that 50 to 75% of the global population could be exposed to life-threatening climatic conditions by the end of the century due to extreme heat and humidity, right? That we're talking about wet bulb temperatures. We're already seeing some of that now. SI Appendix provides further details on several key studies of the extreme climate change. The IPCC reports synthesize peer-reviewed literature regarding climate change impacts and vulnerabilities and mitigation. The stream seems interesting. Follow. Good luck. Oh, thanks. Thank you so much, man. I stream currently. I'm streaming on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Central, U.S. Central Standard Time. Thanks so much for the follow. Thanks for chatting. Have a great weekend. Get some sleep. Stay warm. Okay. Despite identifying 15 tipping points, you already have a private nuclear power plant in my garden. I know, right? Yeah, I also got a new video card, an NVIDIA 3070 Ti, and I was worried about the power draw. I think I have a 1,000-watt power supply. I think that's what I got, but it's doing okay. I haven't had any problems with it so far. Okay. Despite identifying 15 tipping points in biosphere, oceans, and cryosphere in the Working Group 1 contribution to the 6th assessment report, many with irreversible thresholds, there were very few publications on catastrophic scenarios that could be assessed. The most notable coverage is the Working Group 2, Reasons for Concern, syntheses that have been reported since 2001. A 3090? Oh, do you? Okay, good to know. How's that 3090 treating you? It's fucking overkill. It's got to be overkill for anything you're doing, unless you're doing drafting or video work or something like that. I mean, 3090 is just a fucking monster. It's just ridiculous how much power that has. I mean, it's basically bordering on what you would need for professional video design. It's like a program card, basically. You have 1200 watt. Yeah, my friend who helped me build this said 750 is all I need, but like I was paranoid because like I don't know, so I went 1000 just to make sure I didn't have to worry about it. Yeah, but 1500 is what I was originally going to go for, 1500 watt one, so I'd never have to worry about it. You need to show off. Got to keep up with the Joneses, huh? I think next year I'm gonna try and get a 40. I bought a 4070. I was originally gonna I was thinking of getting a 4060 or a 3060 this year, but I went for a 3070. So next year I'm gonna buy a 4080 and then I'll be done. So like the 4000 line from Nvidia is like almost double the processing power of the 3000 line. It's crazy, crazy. Okay, these syntheses were designed to inform determination of what is dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system that the UNFCCC aims to prevent. The 5 concerns are unique and threatened ecosystems, frequency and severity of extreme weather events, global distribution and balance of impacts, total economic and ecological impact, and irreversible large-scale abrupt transitions. Each IPCC assessment found greater risks occurring at lower increases in global mean temperatures. In the 6th assessment report, all 5 concerns were listed as very high for temperatures of 1.2 to 4.5 degrees Celsius. In contrast, only 2 were rated as very high at this temperature interval in the previous assessment report. All 5 concerns are now high or very high for 2 to 3 degrees Celsius warming. And of course, I'm running AI to take over the world. So you're not turning your computer off at night then, right? I gotcha. That's funny. So yeah, like I'm saying here, 1.5, 1.2 to 4.5 between there, we're easily going to be 3 degrees Celsius, probably near the end of the century. And all of these issues are high or very high, somewhere in there. Yeah, it's bad. It's gonna be bad. It's only a background process. I can't imagine any AI being a quote background process. Well, it could be. It could be a background process, I suppose. I mean, okay. If you're gonna take over the world, it can't. It's not gonna be a background process. It could be if you're sending out there, to just infect things slowly. Okay, I'm watching you. I'm watching you, mister. A sample research agenda, extreme Earth system states, mass mortality, societal fragility, and integrated climate catastrophe assessments. We suggest a research agenda for catastrophic climate change that focuses on 4 key strands. Why don't they number these? Understanding extreme climate change dynamics and impacts in the long term, exploring climate-triggered pathways to mass morbidity and mortality, investigating social fragility, vulnerabilities, risk cascades, and risk responses, synthesizing the research findings into integrated catastrophe assessments. Okay. Our proposed agenda learns from and builds on integrated assessment models that are being adapted to better assess large-scale harms. Trump almost succeeded, so if Trump can do it, then my AI PC. There you go. Well, if you're gonna do that, make sure you have climate change as your primary agenda for your AI. That'll be good. Take over the world that way by turning the Earth back into the Earth. That'd be amazing. A range of tipping points have been assessed, 58, with effects varying from a 10% chance of doubling the social cost of carbon up to an 8-fold increase in the optimal carbon price. This echoes earlier findings that welfare estimates depend on fat tail risks. Model assumptions such as discount rates, exogenous growth rates, risk preferences, and damage functions also strongly influence outcomes. There are large, important aspects missing from these models that are highlighted in the research agenda. Longer-term impacts under extreme climate change, pathways toward mass morbidity and mortality, and the risks, cascades, and systemic risks that extreme climate impacts could trigger. It is calculating the solution. I'll sell solution to the highest bidder. That way they can bury it so that no one else gets it. You capitalist, you. Damn it, foiled again. Progress in these areas would allow for more realistic models and damage functions and help provide direct estimates of casualties, a necessary moral, non-economic measure of climate risk. We urge the research community to develop integrated conceptual and semi-quantitative models of climate catastrophes. Finally, we invite other scholars to revise and improve upon this proposed agenda. Extreme Earth system states. We need to understand potential long-term states of the Earth system under extreme climate change. This means mapping different hothouse Earth scenarios or other extreme scenarios, such as alternative circulation regimes or large irreversible changes in ice cover and sea level. This research will require consideration of long-term climate dynamics and their impacts on other planetary level processes. Research suggests that previous mass extinction events occurred due to threshold effects in the carbon cycle that we could cross this century. Key impacts in previous mass extinctions, such as ocean hypoxia and anoxia, could also escalate in the longer term. Yeah, if that happens, yeah, definitely, that's game over. You could keep a copy and sell multiple times. You could. That would be better. That way, but then you're keeping it out of the people who actually need it, though. That would actually lessen the amount of money you get from it if you did it that way. So if you had the answer towards saving, saving Earth's biosphere, and only the rich people bought it, people who really need it couldn't get access to it unless governments started buying it. And then if they bought it and open sourced it, but then of course you could put in there that you can't open source it, right? Contractual agreement. Or they couldn't sell it at all or open source it. It's like the solution will involve a lot of paying and hoping for miracles. Pretty much. That's what it's all gonna be at this point. Studying potential tipping points and irreversible committed changes of ecological and climate systems is essential. For instance, modeling of the Antarctic ice sheet suggests there are several tipping points that exhibit hysteresis. Irreversible loss of the West Antarctic ice sheet was found to be triggered at approximately 2 degrees Celsius global warming, and the current ice sheet configuration cannot be regained even if temperatures return to present-day levels at 6 degrees Celsius to 9 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature. Slow irreversible loss of the East Antarctic ice sheet over 40 meters of sea level rise equivalent could be triggered. Similar studies of areas such as the Greenland ice sheet, permafrost, and terrestrial vegetation would be helpful. Identifying all the potential Earth system tipping points is crucial. This should include consideration of wider planetary boundaries, such as biodiversity, that will influence tipping points, feedbacks beyond the climate change system, and how tipping points could cascade together. But I wonder what kind of microphone you got. Oh, so it's a deity. What the hell is it? But the cheapest deity I could find. It's you can't even see it because it's being greened out. Okay, so it's deity V-Mic D3 Pro. It's a universal shotgun microphone. It's primarily made for you can kind of see in the picture for cameras, putting on cameras. I was just messing. I got it put up last night, trying to mess with it, and I got it. I got it to work this morning, so I'm using it for the first time, trying it out. I've got a Stream Deck XL. I've got a Beacon Mix Create, and I'm trying to get that to work. It's working okay so far, but it's not taking the music that you should be hearing and putting it into to you guys. So that I have to try and figure out. Yeah, lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. And this book talks about this sort of a thing a little bit. Donut Economics has her donut, which talks about passing the Earth's boundaries right here. So that's part of her economic model. That's a book I would read too. This is her 17-minute. It's a short 17-minute presentation talking about her donut economics. Rodecaster Pro. Yeah, I had a pod mic, but it was getting in my way because like you don't see my microphone here now, which is awesome because I can freely copy and paste and I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, I went that route, so I don't have to worry about it getting in my way. It's not positioned where I want it yet, but I'm gonna once I get my new desk put together, I'll put it in a much better space so I can get better. A Broadcaster Pro. Oh, okay. I've not heard of a Broadcaster Pro. Who's that? Who's that by? You have both? Nice. Nice. Yeah, I like my pod mic. I used it for 2 years basically, until I replaced it with this deity, hoping that this is going to work okay. Seems to be working okay. Sound seems really good. And I have my I have this going through NVIDIA's broadcaster to clean up the sound. So hopefully it's sounding really, really good. All right, mass morbidity and mortality. There are many potential contributors to climate-induced morbidity and mortality, but the four horsemen of the climate change endgame are likely to be famine and undernutrition, extreme weather events, conflict, and vector-borne diseases. Right? Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly right. As the temperature goes up, again, I'm talking about the food, what we need to do to save the food supply. Everyone's going to be coming north, and it's just going to be everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket very quickly. These will be worsened by additional risks and impacts, such as mortality from air pollution and sea level rise. These pathways require further study. Empirical estimates of even direct fatalities from heat stress thus far in the United States are systematically underestimated. A review of health and climate change literature from 1985 to 2013, with a proxy review up to 2017, found that of 2,143 papers, only 189, or 9%, included a dedicated discussion of more extreme health impacts or systemic risk relating to migration, famine, and conflict. Models also rarely include adaptive responses, thus the overall mortality estimates are uncertain. How can potential mass morbidity and mortality be better accounted for? 1. Track compound hazards through bottom-up modeling of systems and vulnerabilities, and rigorously stress test preparedness. 2. Apply models to higher temperature scenarios and longer timelines. 3. Integrate risk cascades and systemic risks into health risk assessments, such as by incorporating morbidity and mortality resulting from a climate-triggered food price shock. Okay, yep. You should be able to put links in here. It's not letting you? Oh, okay. Yeah, looks a little bit. I've got that kind of mesh thing on the top. And I got black on the bottom. Black on the body. When I paste it, it disappears? Oh. I've always allowed links. I'll have to check my settings in Twitch, because you should be able to. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. I'll have to check that out. Pretty. Ready microphone. Okay. Societal fragility, vulnerabilities, risk cascades, and risk responses. More complex risk assessments are generally more realistic. The determinants of risk are not just hazards, vulnerabilities, and exposures, but also responses. A complete risk assessment needs to consider climate impacts, differential exposure, systemic vulnerabilities, responses of societies and actors, and the knock-on effects across borders and sectors, potentially resulting in systemic crises. In the worst cases, a domino effect or spiral could continuously worsen the initial risk. Yep, true statement. One country suffering is going to lead towards other countries suffering because they're going to need places to live, housing, food, medicine, and everything. Societal risk cascades could involve conflict, disease, political change, and economic crises. Climate change has a complicated relationship with conflict, including possibly as a risk factor, especially in areas with pre-existing ethnic conflict. Climate change could affect the spread and transmission of infectious diseases, as well as the expansion and severity of different zoonotic infections, which we're seeing now with the monkeypox, right? Creating conditions for novel outbreaks, COVID-19 and infections. Epidemics can in turn trigger cascading impacts, as in the case of COVID-19. Exposure to ecological stress and natural disasters are key determinants for the cultural tightness, strictness of rules, adherence to tradition, and severity of punishment of societies. The literature on the median economic damages of climate change is profuse, but there is far less on financial tail risks, such as the possibility of global financial crises. Yeah, and this is, of course, one of the reasons why monetary systems are so wrong and so problematic, because everything we do has a dollar sign on it, and with the amount of damage that's going to be done due to climate change, it's going to be so expensive to fix. And a lot of countries aren't doing the right thing because they don't have the money to do it. Whereas if we had a resource-based economy, we would just go, oh, okay, this is what we need to do, so we're going to do it. Past studies could be drawn upon to investigate societal risk. Relatively small regional climate changes are linked to the transformation and even collapse of previous societies. This could be due to declining resilience and the passing of tipping points in these societies. There is some evidence for critical slowing down in societies prior to their collapse. However, care is needed in drawing lessons from pre-modern cases. Prehistory and history should be studied to determine not just how past societies were affected by specific climate hazards, but how those effects differ on societies and differ as societies change with respect to, for example, population density, wealth inequality, and governance regime. Such framing will allow past and current societies to be brought under a single system of analysis. Yeah, this is exactly right. So obviously more conservative governments are going to do less and crack down more, whereas much more equitable ones will act earlier and act more fairly to try and help more people. Characteristics and vulnerabilities of a modern globalized world where food and transport distribution systems can buffer against traumas will need to feature in work on societal sensitivity. Such large interconnected systems bring their own source of fragility, particularly if networks are relatively homogeneous, with a few dominant nodes highly connected to everyone else. Right. So like one country making a lot of one type of food, that is not good. Other important modern day vulnerabilities include the rapid spread of misinformation and disinformation. These epistemic risks are serious concerns for public health crisis and have already hindered climate action. A high-level and simplified depiction of how risk cascades can unfold is provided in Figure 3. So global warming, sea level rise, extreme weather events, displacement, mortality. Oh yeah, look at that. I had the window open, so it became a bit chilly. I think I'll turn the background a bit higher. Get that AI chomping. That'll get your temperature up. Okay, it is 5 o'clock. All right. 5 o'clock. I'm done. All right, so Anaholics, any last minute comments before we call this a day? Keep an eye on your AI. Keep an eye on it. You got me worried now. So after this, I'm going to work on trying to get my wife's get our yoga studio's computer to work properly. She brought it in. I love you too, man. Thank you so much. Hey, Girly Bear. It's good to see you too. You have a good weekend. So I'll work on our studio computer, then I'll work on my desk. See if I can get that up and running by Monday. We'll see. We'll see. Love you guys. Thank you much for gifting me with your time. I really do appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Stay cool. Stay safe. Disease free. And we'll see you guys next week.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue. Watch the stars.